Chapter 955. Chu Liyue's figure quickly disappeared in front of him, and the crack on the barrier quickly closed. In the blink of an eye, the two Shin formations that had been forcefully separated were reconnected. The silver light flickered and then gradually dimmed. The barrier returned to its normal state and became transparent again. It was as if nothing had happened. Wu Yao closed his eyes, still in a daze. Then he couldn't help but pinch his face. Hiss! The piercing pain woke him up abruptly and he hurriedly stopped. But at the same time, it made him realize that everything that had happened was real. Her Highness had actually opened the Dark North Imperial Palace's barrier. Damn, Wu Yao couldn't help but mutter. Could it be that Her Highness had just found a place to continue cultivating these 2 years? Otherwise, how could she have done that? But thinking about it carefully, that didn't seem to be the case. Big Brother had sent a message saying that Her Highness had indeed changed her physical body and returned to the Western Tomb from Yao Chen with the identity of Chu Liyue. It seemed that her physical body had been a good-for-nothing with a damaged Yuan meridian, but now, no wonder Her Highness was so certain that she would talk about the Eastern Palace all night. Perhaps he still had other trump cards up his sleeves? Wu Yao rubbed his temples and felt a headache coming on. With such an outstanding master, it would be very difficult for them as subordinates, all right? Chu Liyue's figure perfectly blended into the night. Her figure was nimble and her steps were fast. Coupled with the fact that she had already memorized the layout of the palace, her journey was very smooth as she headed straight for the Eastern Palace. She met some palace guards on night patrol, but she had already concealed her aura, so she wasn't discovered. About 15 minutes later, she finally arrived at the outer courtyard of the Eastern Palace. Perhaps because the Crown Prince wasn't around and it was night, the security of the outer courtyard of the Eastern Palace wasn't very strict. No one would have thought that someone would be so daring as to sneak in at night. They also didn't expect that such a powerful barrier couldn't stop someone. Chu Liyue quietly slipped into the inner court. As soon as Chu Liyue stepped into the boundary of the inner courtyard, he immediately felt the obvious difference between this place and the outer courtyard. In the darkness, several hidden and powerful auras were hidden in several corners. In addition to the guards on the surface, there were also many experts guarding the inner court in secret. Fortunately, Chu Liyue had made ample preparations. As long as she didn't bump into them head-on, these people wouldn't be able to easily discover her. Chu Liyue was hiding in the dark. He closed his eyes and held his breath, trying to find Chu Ning's aura. Back when she was in Yao Chen's capital, Chu Ning was always worried about her because of her repeated mishaps. Therefore, she left something on Chu Ning's body so that they could sense each other within a certain range. Now he didn't know if he could rely on this to find him. The surroundings were silent as Chu Liyue waited patiently. After an unknown period of time, a weak fluctuation came over. Chu Liyue suddenly opened his eyes. He looked in a certain direction. It seemed to be in the study. Chu Liyue's brows furrowed slightly. Wu Yao had previously said that her father had entered this study a month and a half ago, but the aura inside was already very faint, as if he had left for a long time. However, this fluctuation was indeed coming from there. Perhaps, it was hidden in the secret passage under the study, or in some other unknown location. No matter what, she had to go in and take a look. It was a pity that there were several guards outside the study. It would be difficult to sneak in without being noticed. Just as Chu Liyue was thinking to herself, the sound of footsteps came from not far away. She quickly looked back and saw a man walking over from the outer courtyard. She immediately hid her figure completely. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, and the man's figure and face gradually became clearer. At this moment, the night was dark and only the stars were flickering slightly. Chu Liyue could only see a rough outline. For some reason she felt that this person looked familiar. Soon she realized that this man seemed to be planning to go to the study. When he reached the door of the study, the soldier in charge of guarding immediately bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Lord Shang." Shang Binghe nodded. "Is there anything unusual in the inner courtyard today?" "Nothing." The soldier shook his head in unison. That's good." Shang Binghe nodded. With one hand behind his back, he looked very imposing. "The Crown Prince is not here, but we must not relax." "Yes." One of the soldiers hesitated for a moment and couldn't help but ask. "Lord Shang, didn't you already patrol during the day? Why are you here so late?" Shang Binghe glanced at the tightly shut door of the study. For some reason, he had been feeling uneasy for the past 2 days. He had originally planned to rest, but his heart was beating so fast that he couldn't calm down. Thus he decided to take a look again. "It's nothing." The Crown Prince is not here, so I wanted to take a look and ensure that everything is safe. The two soldiers nodded in understanding. Shang Binghe had always been very cautious and strict, so it wasn't strange that he would do such a thing. What was rare was that the Crown Prince seemed to trust him very much and gave him a lot of authority. This allowed him to move around in the inner courtyard. He was highly regarded, so the people below him were naturally very respectful and polite to him. After confirming that there were no problems here, Shang Binghe planned to turn around and leave. However, just as he turned around, he suddenly stopped and stared at the lock of the door. Sensing the change in his aura, the two soldiers were a little confused and nervous. "Lord Shang, why are you? Did anyone enter this study during the day?" Shang Binghe asked coldly. Yes, Chen Dihao came, said that he was on the orders of the Crown Prince. Slap. Slap. Before they could finish, Shang Binghe gave the two of them a hard slap. They were sent flying. Bang. The two of them fell heavily to the ground. They spat out blood. Fools. Shang Binghe's face was ashen. Who is that Chen Dihao? How could the Crown Prince give him an order alone? Do you have brains? The two soldiers were beaten until they couldn't speak. They fell to the ground and spat out blood. They were on the verge of death. Shang Binghe was powerful and didn't hold back when he attacked in anger. How could these people be his match? He strode towards the study room, unlocked the door and pushed the door open. Chu Luiyue looked at the open door and her eyes moved slightly. At this moment, there was a sudden fluctuation on the Jin Lingzi. She lowered her eyes to take a look and was slightly shocked. Yuan Jinghong's Jin Lingzi was also crushed. She gritted her teeth and activated her force. The peach blossom mark on her wrist suddenly glowed. The next moment, her figure suddenly disappeared. Digression, 6 o'clock in the evening. It's clearly the same time as the first update. The Academy has drawn a lot. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 956. After Shang Binghe entered the study, he immediately conducted a careful inspection. But after looking around, he did not find any traces of it being rummaged through. There was not even the slightest sign that someone had been here. But this made Shang Binghe even more uneasy. Because this meant that the other party was not here for the items in the room, but for something else. Who knew what kind of intentions they had to deliberately enter this place and be so careful not to leave any traces behind? Finally, Shang Binghe walked to the bookshelf and searched it for a while. Then, on the wall behind the bookshelf, a hidden compartment popped up. He took out something from the hidden compartment, looked at it for a while, and seemed to heave a sigh of relief before putting it back. Thank goodness. His voice was very low, but one could still hear the relief and fear in it. After standing still for a while, he pushed the hidden compartment back and did something on the bookshelf, as if he was restoring the mechanism on it. After a while, after confirming that everything was safe, he turned around and walked out, locking the door again. Shang Binghe stood on the steps in front of the door, his voice cold. Bring Chen Dihao here immediately. Realizing that something was wrong, the soldiers in charge of guarding reacted and hurriedly responded. Yes, yes. After saying that, he hurriedly left, even though his legs were still nimble. The soldiers who were beaten half to death by him earlier were lying on the ground, their faces and bodies covered in blood, but they did not dare to beg for mercy, only trembling in fear. They knew very well that if something happened, they would be the first to die. Shang Binghe coldly glanced at the two of them. Men, tie the two of them up. When Chen Dihao comes, we will confront him together. Yes. Outside the study, the smell of blood permeated the air, and the cold and oppressive atmosphere was almost suffocating. And inside the study, Chu Luiyue was finally able to breathe. She moved her wrists and neck, feeling sore and refreshed. When Shang Binghe came in, she took the opportunity to teleport and sneak in as well. In the end, Shang Binghe searched for a long time, forcing her to curl up in an extremely narrow space, her entire body almost stiff. Fortunately, he finally went out and closed the door again. This undoubtedly made things much more convenient for Chu Luiyue. Even she had to admit that her luck tonight was truly heaven-defying. After confirming that the people outside were still waiting to catch Chen Dihao, Chu Luiyue felt a little relieved and silently walked to the bookshelf. Just now, she only vaguely saw Shang Binghe fiddling around here for a while and opening the secret compartment, but she didn't see clearly how he did it. Therefore, she had to think of a way to break it as soon as possible. At first glance, this bookshelf was no different from an ordinary bookshelf. There were no barriers, no profound formations, and there weren't even any special patterns. It was normal and ordinary. Chu Luiyue stared at it for a while before hesitantly making a move. She had once learned mechanisms from Xin Yi for a period of time, so she could barely recognize that this seemed to be some sort of mechanism. However, even she wasn't sure if she could successfully open it. After that, she tried several methods, but there was no reaction from this thing. Lord Shang Chen Dihao is here. Suddenly, an ear-piercing voice came from outside. Chu Luiyue was shocked. Her time was running out. She had to open this mechanism as soon as possible. In a moment of desperation, she quickly tried again. This time there was finally a change on the bookshelf. The originally flat and smooth surface suddenly split into several parts, and they rose and fell, intersecting with each other. It was a pity that the secret compartment didn't pop out. Chen Dihao, do you know why you were sent here? This was Shang Binghe's voice. Fine beads of sweat appeared on Chu Luiyue's forehead, and she was extremely nervous. She tried again. This subordinate doesn't know. Chen Dihao's voice was at a loss and there was a trace of fear. He was originally sleeping soundly, but who knew that he was suddenly picked up from the bed and brought directly to the palace. And in the courtyard of the Crown Prince's study. Seeing Shang Binghe's expression, he knew that something bad had happened. However, he really didn't know what was going on. They said that you entered the Crown Prince's study today? Shang Binghe said coldly, and then he suddenly shouted, "How dare you!" Slap. A loud slap sounded. Chu Luiyue's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something, and she immediately tried again. The wooden compartment changed, but there was still no movement from the secret compartment. This subordinate didn't, speak. What is going on? Chen Dihao's argument sounded particularly weak at this moment. Could it be that the people in the inner courtyard joined forces to spread rumors against you? Do you want me to bring you in now and help you recall? After Shang Binghe finished speaking, there was a commotion in the courtyard. Among them, the footsteps were getting closer. They seemed to really want to come in and take a look. Chu Luiyue's back was almost drenched in sweat. Click. This was the sound of the lock being unlocked. Chu Luiyue clenched her teeth, and her hands quickly swept across the bookshelf, making one last attempt. If this still didn't work, then no matter what, she would have to give up. Only an extremely soft sound was heard, and the secret compartment finally popped out again. Chu Luiyue directly went forward and took out the item inside. It was cold to the touch and it was heavy. After clearly seeing the item in her hand, Chu Luiyue's face flashed with a trace of surprise. This was actually a bronze mirror. However, unlike ordinary bronze mirrors, this one didn't reflect the face of the person holding the mirror. Instead, it was filled with a thick blood-red color. At first glance, it was like a sea of blood and it was extremely terrifying. A gloomy and terrifying aura spread out from it, almost suffocating. An indescribable chill rose from the bottom of Chu Luiyue's feet, and it made her whole body feel cold. She didn't know why, but with just one look, she felt an extremely terrifying murderous intent. She tried her best to control her impulse to throw the mirror out, and stared at it for a long time. Gradually, the bloody aura on the mirror dissipated bit by bit, and a blurry scene appeared. It seemed to be a cage and the surroundings were dark and nothing could be seen clearly. There was only a blurry figure in the iron cage. He knelt on the ground and there was a chain around his neck. His head was lowered and there were bloodstains on his body and he didn't move at all. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. As soon as she saw the figure, she recognized that it was Chu Ning. She bit her lips tightly and tried her best to restrain herself from shouting out loud. After not seeing him for so long, he seemed to have lost a lot of weight. The clothes on his body looked empty, and she could even see his wrists under his sleeves. They were so thin that only bones were left. Chu Luiyue's chest suddenly surged with endless anger, and it was about to explode. At this moment, with a bang, the door was opened. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 957. Who is it? Shang Binghe, who had just barged in with Chen Dihao's collar, sensed that something was wrong. He threw Chen Dihao to the ground and quickly searched the entire study. It was empty. However, Shang Binghe was sure that there was someone here. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat and he looked at the bookshelf. There were traces of someone tampering with it, as if someone had tried to force it open in a hurry. His heart sank. He quickly walked over to where the hidden compartment was. Everything was normal. He quickly restored the mechanism on the bookshelf to its original state and opened the secret compartment. That thing was still lying inside, safe and sound. Shang Binghe let out a long sigh. It's good that it's not lost, it's good that it's not lost. If this item was lost, all of them would have to bear the consequences. Judging from the situation, someone must have tried to open the mechanism and steal the item in the secret compartment, but before they could succeed, they were interrupted by Shang Binghe and escaped in a hurry. Shang Binghe confirmed that there was nothing wrong with the item before he put the secret compartment back. However, his expression was still very ugly. No matter what, someone had broken into the study and almost stolen the item. When the Crown Prince returned, he would not let it go so easily. Shang Binghe walked to Chen Dihao with a gloomy face. Chen Dihao felt the dangerous aura from Shang Binghe and instinctively shrank back. Lord Shang. I'm innocent, I'm really innocent. I didn't do anything. Swoosh. Shang Binghe stabbed with his sword. It pressed tightly against Chen Dihao's neck. He narrowed his eyes. Tell me what happened during the day. He was sure that Chen Dihao did not have the guts to do so. There was probably something fishy going on. As expected, Chen Dihao was stunned for a moment when he heard this. He suddenly thought of something and hurriedly said, It's Xiao Song. It must be him. Then he recounted everything that had happened. Shang Binghe was so angry that he laughed. So, because of this jug of wine, someone took advantage of you. Chen Dihao, how many lives do you have to drink wine while patrolling the Eastern Palace? This was a serious dereliction of duty, and the serious consequences caused by this were beyond imagination. Do you know that this mistake was caused by your drinking? Even if you died 100 times, it wouldn't be enough. Chen Dihao had no choice but to frantically kowtow and beg for mercy. Actually, he didn't intend to drink it at first, but for some reason when he thought about how he was suppressed by Shang Binghe, he felt very depressed and couldn't help but drink it. Originally, he only wanted to take a few sips to drown his sorrows. Who would have thought that he would lose consciousness in the end? When he woke up again, he found that he had been unconscious in a corner for a long time. Because he knew that what he did was wrong, he felt very guilty, so he pretended that nothing had happened and went back. Who would have thought that such a big thing would happen here? Shang Binghe clenched his fists. Go. Bring that person here as well. However, he knew that since the other party was so well prepared, there was an 80% chance that they would not be able to find him. Sure enough, not long after, a servant came to report that he had disappeared. When Chen Dihao heard this, he immediately knelt down on the ground, his face ashen. He knew that he was finished this time. Shang Binghe had already expected this, but even though he was filled with anger, he still had to suppress the matter first. Immediately seal off the news and don't allow it to spread out of the Eastern Palace. If the slightest bit of news leaks out, you will be held responsible. Also, lock Chen Dihao up and wait for His Highness the Crown Prince to return before making a decision. Yes. Shang Binghe frowned and pondered for a moment before walking outside. Pass down the order, say that a high-level magical beast ran out of the hunting ground. Immediately send more people to search the palace. At the same time, strengthen the security of the palace gates. Don't allow that magical beast to escape. Yes. Outside the palace walls, Wu Yao was anxiously waiting. His Highness had gone in for a long time, but he hadn't come out yet. There was no news at all. He didn't know what the situation was like. At this time the sky was almost bright. If His Highness didn't come out in time, it would be even more troublesome. Just as Wu Yao was filled with worry, the transparent barrier in front of him suddenly fluctuated. He looked over in surprise and saw a crack appear in the middle of the barrier. Immediately, a familiar figure leaped out from it. It was Chu Luiyue. Your Highness. Wu Yao immediately went up to him happily. You're finally out. But when he walked closer, he realized that Chu Luiyue's expression was a little strange. Your Highness, are you all right? Wu Yao asked worriedly. Then, as if he thought of something, he looked behind Chu Luiyue. It was empty. Did they not find Lord Chuning? Chu Luiyue shook his head. It's fine. At least I know the general whereabouts of Father. Unfortunately, I can't bring Father out today. On one hand, she wasn't sure of the way to find Father's location. On the other hand, the Eastern Palace was heavily guarded. She could go back and forth alone, but it would be much more difficult to bring Father along. Moreover, from what she saw just now, once Father broke free from the cage, he might be immediately discovered. Without sufficient preparation, it would be impossible to do so. Wu Yao nodded. It was actually good to be able to confirm the whereabouts of people. After all, the person who took Chuning away and locked him up was the infamous Prince Baiming. It was already very difficult for His Highness to successfully sneak into the Eastern Palace this time to find this information. But looking at His Highness, it seems that Lord Chuning's situation is not optimistic. At this moment, there seemed to be a sudden commotion within the palace walls. Chu Luiyue turned around to take a look. Within the high palace walls, there were flames everywhere and it was very bright. It sounded like they were looking for someone. She stared coldly at them. Suddenly, the Jean Lingzi on her wrist vibrated again. Her heart skipped a beat. With the previous incident where Wu Ming and Yuan Jinghong crushed the Jean Lingzi, her heart would tremble every time she felt the Jean Lingzi's movement. A sense of uneasiness surged from the depths of her heart. She turned her wrist and took a look. As expected. This time it was Mu Hongyu who crushed the Jean Lingzi. It had only been 2 or 3 days since they entered the ancient Phoenix Mountain, but among the 5 of them, 3 had already chosen to crush the Jean Lingzi. Something must have happened. Chu Luiyue suppressed the surging emotions in her heart. Let's go. That night, the dark North Imperial Palace was in chaos. Chu Luiyue acted as if nothing had happened and returned to her residence overnight. It was not until morning that she got up, packed up, and went to the ancient Phoenix Mountain again. When she arrived, Chu Luiyue greeted Ning Yuan and the others in turn and sat down in her seat. Tan Taichen stared at her for a long time and asked ambiguously, "Yesterday something happened in the palace." "I heard that something happened in the palace yesterday. Shengguanyu, what do you think?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 958. Chu Luiyue leaned back lazily in her chair with a slight smile. Senior Tan Tai's question is interesting. This is a matter of the Dark North royal family. No matter how I look at it, it doesn't seem important. I'm afraid you've asked the wrong person. As she spoke, she looked around. Jun Qiji hadn't arrived yet. It was as if he was being held back by this matter. However, Chu Luiyue didn't think that Shang Binghe would tell Jun Qiji the whole thing. Tan Taichen snorted softly. "We've been staying here for the past 2 days and haven't returned. Only you returned yesterday and this happened. Don't you think it's a coincidence?" Chu Luiyue sat up straight and looked at Tan Taichen with a faint smile. "So, Senior Tan Tai, you think this matter has something to do with me?" "I didn't say that." "Isn't that what you mean?" "Now that you've said it, everyone listen up. None of us here are fools. Don't tell me you still expect me to help you investigate this matter?" Chu Luiyue seemed to be joking, but her words were very straightforward. Tan Taichen didn't expect her to be so rude and was a little embarrassed. Chu Luiyue was getting more and more difficult to deal with because of her background. She was still polite before, but now she didn't care about his feelings at all. Tan Taichen didn't think about it. They had bullied her time and time again. No one could endure it forever. Besides, Chu Luiyue wasn't someone who liked to be taken advantage of. She would definitely get back what others owed her. Therefore, she didn't want to be perfunctory with him now. "I'm just asking casually. Why are you so agitated?" Tan Taichen's tone turned cold. Chu Luiyue smiled. "If I also doubt the Taiyu dynasty, I wonder if you can still smile at me?" "You." The atmosphere in the room suddenly froze. Jun Qiji wasn't here, so there was no one who could keep her in check. Gong Sun Shao glanced over but didn't say anything. As for Ning Yuan, he didn't seem to care about these arguments from the beginning. He just looked at the colorful boundary and waited patiently. Tan Taichen couldn't win against Chu Luiyue. In front of so many people, he couldn't say anything more. Even if he won the argument, it was just a momentary slip of the tongue. In the blink of an eye, people might secretly point out that he was bullying the young. If he lost the argument, he would lose even more face. He simply shut his mouth and no longer looked at Chu Luiyue. As long as Ruoli and the others could defeat the Tianling dynasty in the ancient Phoenix Mountains, nothing else mattered. Finally having some peace and quiet, Chu Luiyue rubbed her temples. In reality, she was far from being as carefree as she appeared on the surface. On one hand, she was worried about her father's situation. On the other hand, Jian Fengqi and the others had entered the ancient Phoenix Mountain, and things didn't seem optimistic. This Jean Lingzi was originally given to them as a precaution. After all, no one knew what was going on in the ancient Phoenix Mountain, which hadn't been opened for 1,000 years, and what dangers they would encounter. She didn't expect that in such a short period of time, 3 people would be in trouble. Unfortunately, with this boundary in the way, she couldn't find out what was going on inside. If everyone had encountered such danger, it would be pardonable. But if it was just them, then it would be dangerous. Time passed slowly. When it was evening again, Jun Qiji didn't appear. She didn't know if he was busy dealing with the affairs of the imperial court or the affairs of the Eastern Palace. Chu Luiyue didn't need to think to know that there must be undercurrents surging in Linzhou City at this time. However, she stayed at the foot of the ancient Phoenix Mountain so she wouldn't be affected. From another point of view, this was also a way to hide one's identity. At that time, because she was in too much of a hurry, she didn't restore the mechanism of the bookshelf to its original state. It would inevitably lead to a large-scale and strict search. Of course, she didn't take back that strange mirror. That mirror had an obvious special aura, and if she carried it with her, it would only be quickly found by the other party. She still had to go to that study room again. But obviously it couldn't be in these 2 days. Chu Liyue held her breath and began to cultivate while waiting. Although this place was outside the boundary because it was also at the edge of the ancient Phoenix Mountain, the origin power density was very rich. In fact, after she broke through to the peak of the 6th rank last time, she clearly felt that the power in her body was not completely exhausted. Instead, it was still very abundant. In other words, when she broke through to the peak of the 6th rank, she actually faintly touched the threshold of the 7th rank warrior. She didn't know if it was because she had sparred with Rong Xiu for a long time, but now she understood her strengths and weaknesses better. Naturally, it was easier for her to find a breakthrough point. As the origin power in her body continued to accumulate, the distance between her and the barrier was getting closer and closer. Just like that, 2 days passed. In the middle, Jun Qiji came once but left in a hurry. And because Chu Liyue had been cultivating all this time, she didn't go back again. Most people didn't care too much about Chu Liyue's cultivation. In their opinion, no matter how hard Chu Liyue worked, it was not worth mentioning compared to entering the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Since she took the initiative to give up this opportunity, then she couldn't blame anyone. Without anyone to disturb her, Chu Liyue cultivated in peace and tried to get closer to the next level of the ladder bit by bit. It was the morning of the 6th day. Chu Liyue finished the last cycle, finally opened her eyes and slowly exhaled. Her eyes seemed to be brighter, and the aura on her body seemed to have strengthened. Then she looked up at the colorful boundary. Suddenly, on her wrist the Jin Lingzi vibrated twice. Chu Liyue was shocked and suddenly stood up. It was Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou who had crushed their respective Jin Lingzi. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 959. At this point, the 5 Jin Lingzi had all shattered. This meant that Jian Fengqi and the other 4 who had entered the ancient Phoenix Mountain were all in danger. Logically speaking, when there was no way out, the ancient Phoenix Mountain would take the initiative to eliminate them. But until now, not a single person had come out. Chu Liyue's gaze was fixed on the rainbow barrier. It was calm and peaceful as if nothing had happened. But this made her even more worried. Sensing Chu Liyue's movements, the few people who were waiting at the side all looked over. That girl's expression was cold and her eyes flashed with a cold light. The few of them looked at each other. What was going on? Looking at her expression, could it be that something had happened inside? Tan Taichen thought so in his heart. He narrowed his eyes and an imperceptible cold smile flashed past his lips. No matter how great this Chu Liyue's ability was, she was powerless now. This time, let's see how arrogant she can be. At this moment, Chu Liyue suddenly walked forward and stopped 10 steps away from the rainbow barrier. She raised her eyes and looked at Elder Hua Qian who was standing in the middle. Elders, please help me. I want to enter the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Dead silence. Chu Liyue's words were like a sudden clap of thunder, causing everyone to be stunned. Even Elder Hua Qian, who was used to all kinds of big scenes, was stunned for a moment. Then he frowned. Sheng Guanyu, do you know what you are saying? Because he was a top expert, his status had long surpassed ordinary elders. Even Jun Qiji had to show him some respect. Therefore he was completely qualified to talk to Chu Liyue with such an attitude and tone. Chu Liyue nodded firmly. This junior knows. This ancient Phoenix Mountain only opens once every 1,000 years. The strength of the barrier is simply unimaginable. Even a few days ago when it was at its weakest, all the elders worked together to barely open it. And now you have already missed the best time to enter. Elder Hua Qian shook his head, directly rejecting. You'd better give up on such thoughts. Chu Liyue clenched his fists and frowned. This junior is aware of what you've just said. But now this junior has no choice but to enter. Elders, please help me. Elder Hua Qian stared at her. His aged eyes seemed to have seen through everything, yet they were cold and indifferent. You want to go in because the people inside are in danger, right? If that's really the reason, then you don't have to say anything. Entering the ancient Phoenix Mountain was already fraught with danger. If one wanted to obtain benefits and opportunities that ordinary people could not obtain, then one must have the courage to withstand the corresponding danger and pressure. Let's not talk about how difficult it is to open this barrier. Even if it is forcefully opened and you go in, what about the others? Do you want me to go in with you? Since it was a competition, it had to be fair. These principles had to be understood from the very beginning. Chu Luiyue clenched his fists even tighter in his sleeves, his knuckles turning white. She naturally understood what Elder Hua Qian said. But the crucial point was that the situation of Jian Fengqi and the others was obviously not normal. The ancient Phoenix Mountain was the sacred mountain of the Dark North Empire. It was the place where the experts of the deity realm broke through. Even if there was a certain amount of danger, it was not possible to force these people into a dead end in just a few days. Either there was something strange about the ancient Phoenix Mountain, or someone was secretly targeting them. But no matter which it was, there was no time to delay. Could it be that she had to wait outside helplessly? Seeing the unwillingness in Chu Liyue's eyes, Elder Hua Qian shook his head. As for the result, everything will naturally be revealed after 9 days. 9 days? She could not wait for a day. Originally, she had left the Jin Lingzi to them because she was worried about their safety. It was fine if 1 or 2 were crushed, but now all 5 were crushed. She had to go in today. So Elder Hua Qian is not willing to help? Chu Liyue's voice was cold as she asked word by word. Elder Hua Qian frowned. This Chu Liyue, why was her temper so stubborn? Anger immediately rose in his heart and he said, "That's right. Since you want to go in, it is not that there is no way. As long as you can open the barrier of the ancient Phoenix Mountain yourself, you can go in and out. At that time we will definitely not stop you." Everyone had different expressions. Wasn't this blocking Chu Liyue's path? Including Elder Hua Qian, this barrier was finally opened by the combined efforts of a total of 25 peak experts from various empires. Letting Chu Liyue come alone? How could she do it? This was clearly a rejection of her request. After hearing this, Chu Liyue stood on the spot and did not speak for a long time. Her eyes were obscure. Ning Yuan, who did not seem to care about other things, turned his gaze and said, "Everyone has their own lives. Elder Hua Qian is right. Since they have entered, they must be prepared to bear everything. Don't tell me you still want to protect them? How could there be such logic in this world?" Moreover, she was still a child herself. Even if she was worried and apprehensive, she should consider the actual situation. Wanting to force their way into the ancient Phoenix Mountain at this time was too absurd. Gong Sun Zhao's eyes turned, but he did not say anything and only watched from the sidelines. On the other hand, Tan Taichen could not hold back and laughed, as if he was mocking and ridiculing. "You didn't go in when you could, and now you want to force your way in. Could it be that this ancient Phoenix Mountain is under your command, and everything has to listen to you?" Such willful and reckless behavior was truly laughable. What did she think this ancient Phoenix Mountain was? How could it allow her to behave so atrociously? In this world, the strong are respected. Some people want something that does not belong to them, so they naturally have to pay the price. Those people from the Tianling dynasty, their overall strength seemed to be the weakest among these people, right? How could they not fail like this? Chu Liyue turned around, her gaze as cold as ice as she stared at Tan Taichen. "Price. Seems like Emperor Huairan seems to know something?" Tan Taichen's expression stiffened for a moment, but quickly returned to normal. "We don't know anything else. We only know that the winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. Those who do not have the strength should not have come out to make a fool of themselves." This was a blatant mockery. Everyone present could not help but look at Chu Liyue. Anyone who heard this would not be able to hold back their anger. However, Chu Liyue's expression was so calm that it was frightening. Even the corners of her lips were slightly curled up, forming a smile. However, the smile did not reach her eyes, causing people to unconsciously feel a chill in their hearts. Emperor Huairan's words are reasonable. In this world, only the strong have the right to speak. She turned around and looked at Elder Hua Qian. Elder Hua Qian's heart suddenly jumped. A strong sense of uneasiness welled up. Chu Liyue tilted her head. "Elder Hua Qian, you just said that as long as I open this barrier, I can do whatever I want, right?" Elder Hua Qian frowned but still nodded. "That's right." "Good." Chu Liyue shouted. "Then today I will open this barrier. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 960. Everyone thought that Chu Liyue had gone crazy. She was going to open the barrier? She must be dreaming. After a short silence, Tan Taichen laughed out loud. Looks like Emperor Yuan she is planning to let us all have an eye-opener? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Chu Liyue did not care about his mockery at all. Her elegant and noble face was cold and stern. The next moment she suddenly raised her hand. Long Yuan's sword. In an instant the wind howled. A powerful aura gathered from all directions. A long black sword appeared in her hand. The black sword was dark and dull. It was simple and majestic. There was only a very thin silver groove in the middle of the sword. The moment it appeared, the surrounding light seemed to be swallowed up by it. The powerful aura was frightening. Chu Liyue flipped her wrist. Roar! In an instant there seemed to be the roar of a dragon. It was majestic. The aura was shocking. Everyone's expression changed. That was a divine artifact. Could this be the Long Yuan sword that the Taizu of the Tianling dynasty personally forged? Shocked discussions could be heard from the crowd. It must be. Is there a second Long Yuan sword in the world? By the way, I heard that Shang Guanyu was able to ascend to the throne because of this Long Yuan sword. This is a real divine artifact. The moment he saw the Long Yuan sword, the smile on Tan Taichen's face suddenly froze. The curve of his lips became very forced. However, he immediately snorted. So what if you have a divine artifact? We don't believe that a mere peak tier 6 can really split open this enchantment. The power of a divine artifact was closely related to the strength of its owner. If it was a powerful person, it would be fine. However, if it was not powerful enough, it would be difficult to withstand the pressure of the divine artifact. Not to mention others. In Tan Taichen's opinion, Chu Liyue's Long Yuan sword was useless. Gong Sun Xiao, Ning Yuan and the others obviously thought so too. Their expressions were not optimistic. She is still young after all, Gong Sun Xiao chuckled and murmured. Ning Yuan did not say anything. However, when his gaze swept across the Long Yuan sword, he paused for a moment. Chu Liyue turned a deaf ear to the discussions around her. Taizu, I have to trouble you again, she said in her heart. Taizu laughed. It's just a barrier. What trouble? Girl, just watch. Shortly after, an extremely powerful aura suddenly surged out from the Long Yuan sword. What? When Tan Taichen and the others sensed this unusual power, they were all shocked. Even Elder Hua's eyelids to this aura. This aura? It was actually several times stronger than him. This was obviously open for me. At this moment, Chu Liyue held the Long Yuan sword with both hands. She raised it up high and slashed it down heavily. A black light blade flew out rapidly. Swoosh. The void was instantly cut open. A huge black space crack appeared and countless turbulent currents surged. In the blink of an eye, the black light blade had already flown above the colorful barrier. Buzz. As if it felt the threat, the barrier suddenly fluctuated rapidly. At the same time it roared. The two forces began to fight. They were actually evenly matched. Seeing this scene, everyone was dumbfounded. However, to Chu Liyue it was still not enough. She had to find a way to gain the upper hand and break this barrier as soon as possible. Thinking of this, she moved her mind. On top of the Long Yuan sword, a red flame instantly burned. Boom. A fireball flew out rapidly. It collided with the two forces that were in a stalemate. Crack. With a crisp sound, a crack appeared on the colorful barrier. Chu Liyue's eyes lit up. However, in the next moment, the forces from the side surged over and quickly repaired the crack. When Tan Taichen and the others saw this scene, they all inexplicably heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it did not break. If Chu Liyue really broke the barrier and broke in, where would they put their faces? Even so, it was already very shocking that she could shake it and create a crack. Taizu's voice was a little more serious. This barrier has existed for thousands of years and has been nourished by the power of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. It is not that easy to break. If you want to enter, you have to directly cut it open. Just a crack is definitely not enough. Chu Liyue nodded. Where knows? Immediately, she held her breath and concentrated, once again urging the force in her body. In her dantian, the water droplet quickly rotated. Then, an even stronger force than before condensed on top of the Long Yuan sword. A silver dragon-like bolt of lightning flashed across the Long Yuan sword. That is the power of Tianlei. Gong Sun Xiao finally could not hold it in. He stood up in shock and stared at Chu Liyue with his eyes wide open. Wasn't she only at the peak of rank 6? How could she display such power? Generally speaking, only experts of rank 7 and above could achieve such a realm. Gong Sun Xiao and the others did not know that the pressure of Tianlei was nothing to her. After all, when she was forging the Cloud Sky Copper Sword, Tianlei did not come down for a long time, and she was the one who forcefully caught it. The Long Yuan sword recognized her as its master, so everything was naturally under her control. Chu Liyue took a deep breath and with a stern expression, she slashed the second time. Seeing that Chu Liyue had not given up, Tan Taichen could not help but sneer. What a fool! Before he could finish his sentence, it was as if someone had suddenly grabbed his throat, and his voice stopped abruptly. The others in the field all had faces of disbelief at this time. In the middle of the colorful barrier, there was actually a hole that had been forcefully split open. There was no sound at all. When this sword landed, it actually split open the barrier without a sound. Looking carefully, one could see that the edge of the barrier that was torn open was burning with red flames. It seemed that it was because of the deterrence of this layer of flames that caused the colorful barrier to be unable to recover. Instead, the tear became bigger and bigger. Elder Hua Qian and the others who were standing nearby felt it the most. Almost at the same time that the Long Yuan sword landed, the barrier was silently shattered. Even the pressure on their bodies was immediately reduced by a lot. Everyone was speechless as they looked at the lady in red standing there in shock. Her figure was slender and tall, her hair like clouds and her clothes fluttered in the wind. She held a black long sword in her hand, and the flames were burning brightly. She was like a god of war who had killed her way out from the flames of hell. At this moment, the pressure around her body was heavy, and it actually caused people to unconsciously submit to her. Chu Luiyue looked at the torn opening and heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. She turned around and her gaze landed on Tan Taichen. Her lips curled into a smile and she was unbridled. Didn't Emperor Huairan say that he wanted this empress to help him open his eyes? Then just now, did you look carefully? Tan Taichen almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 961. Chu Luiyue weighed the Long Yuan sword in her hand and smiled leisurely. However, I've always been generous. Emperor Huairan, you don't have to thank me. Thank me? Thank my ass. Tan Taichen's chest hurt, and he was so angry that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. But now that the barrier was opened, he couldn't even refute. Who would have thought that Chu Luiyue would actually do it? Not only Tan Taichen but everyone present was also shocked. This barrier could only be opened with the help of so many experts. How could it be so easy for Chu Luiyue? Even if her talent and strength were heaven-defying, shouldn't she be more reasonable? How was he going to let others live? With the help of that Taizu from the Tianling dynasty. No wonder you're so confident. Ning Yuan spoke in a low voice, but he was looking at the Long Yuan sword. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. She wasn't surprised that Ning Yuan could guess this, because she didn't plan to hide it from him from the start. From the first attempt, Taizu had already made a move. Anyone who observed carefully would have noticed it. Taizu. Gong Sun Shao was stunned for a moment, then quickly reacted. The one who's half a step into the realm of the gods? Yes. Wasn't there a rumor that Shangguan Yu had returned with a new body? At first it wasn't accepted, but later on with the help of the Tianling Taizu the problem was solved? That person seemed to have died a long time ago, but in reality, there was still a soul left. But even if it was just a soul, it was much stronger than an ordinary person to deal with this barrier. After all, it was the person closest to that legendary realm. Elder Hua Qian and the others also realized this point, and their expressions were complicated. No wonder. With that person's help, it wasn't surprising that Chu Luiyue dared to be so arrogant and even split open the barrier. Tan Taichen suddenly felt a lingering fear. The Tianling Taizu? Wouldn't that be like a demigod? If she had asked for that person's help before, Tan Taichen suddenly felt uneasy. If that Shangguan Yu knew what they did, at this moment, he suddenly realized that this woman was indeed not easy to provoke. After thinking about it, he kept his mouth shut. It seems that they all thought that you were able to open the barrier because of my help. Great Ancestor's voice came faintly. I really don't know how they would look if they knew that I was actually the one who was actually the one who was the one who did all the work. He had indeed exerted a great deal of strength in the first sword strike, but at that time he had only managed to draw with the rainbow-colored barrier. After all, his cultivation level, he was to Taizu was. However, most of the strength of the second sword came from the water droplet in Chu Luiyue's dantian. It could be said to it it's too. The moment the Long Yuan sword, which had been infused with this power, clashed with the barrier, it easily crushed it. Even though Taizu already knew that this thing wasn't simple, he was still shocked. Chu Luiyue laughed in his heart. It's just luck. This trump card was still quite useful sometimes. Taizu didn't say anything. He didn't tell Chu Luiyue that when that power came, even he felt a trace of fear. That was a reverence that would only emerge from the depths of one's heart when facing absolute power. This last still doesn't seem to know what kind of heaven-shaking object is hidden in her body. Chu Luiyue didn't waste too much time with them. He turned around and looked at Elder Hua Qian. Elder Hua Qian, can I go in now? Elder Hua Qian's lips moved. The wrinkles on his old face seemed to have gathered even more tightly. What else could he say? The truth was right in front of him. Could he go back on his words? Finally, he nodded with difficulty. This old man always keeps his words. Just go in. Chu Luiyue smiled. Thank you very much. With that, she took a step forward and was about to enter. Wait. Gong Sun Zhao's voice suddenly sounded. Chu Luiyue paused and looked back. Gong Sun Zhao was startled by her cold gaze. He subconsciously looked away and laughed. This, Sheng Guanyu, look, this is a competition after all. If you go in like this, wouldn't it be unfair to the others? Chu Luiyue already knew what he wanted to say. She raised her eyebrows slightly. Oh? Then what should we do according to Elder Gongsuan's suggestion? Gong Sun Zhao coughed. Actually, he also felt a little embarrassed, but there was no other way around it. Look, since you're going in, then we'll each send one person in. How about it? This time we can send 5 people in. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully. You're right. If I go in alone, it'll be quite boring. This time, even Tan Taichin and the others looked over. Chu Luiyue touched her chin and smiled brightly. Why don't I close this spirit formation first, and then I ask everyone to send people to open this spirit formation and enter it? To be fair, I can wait for a while. What? How can that be? Gong Sun Zhao instinctively refuted. Didn't you open the barrier? Why? Chu Luiyue smiled faintly. You know that I'm the one who opened the barrier? Then what right do you have to bargain with me? Gong Sun Zhao suddenly realized something and shut his mouth with a pale face. There was dead silence in the hall. Chu Luiyue looked around. I'm sorry. I don't like to owe others, but I hate it when others owe me. You want to take advantage of me? Are you daydreaming? This time the surroundings finally quieted down. She turned around and was about to go forward when she suddenly remembered something. She tilted her head slightly and glanced at Ning Yuan. Oh right. There's something I forgot to mention. Ning Yuan seemed to feel something and looked up. Then he saw the beautiful and awe-inspiring woman. Her eyes were like stars and her lips curled into a smile. I don't care about others, but I'll protect my people to the end. Digression, 6:06 p.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 962. Then Chu Luiyue's figure moved, and she entered through the split entrance. When she was completely inside, she lifted her wrist and retracted the burning red flame. The opening quickly closed after losing its restraining power and returned to its original state. Sigh. Gong Sun Zhao watched with his mouth agape. A hint of disappointment appeared in his eyes. He had wanted to take the opportunity to go in. He did not expect Chu Luiyue to be so ruthless. She did not give them any leeway at all. Tan Taichin snorted. Brother Gong Sun, that Sheng Guanyu is very stingy. We can't count on her. Gong Sun Zhao's expression was a little awkward. She was the one who opened the barrier. Isn't she free to do whatever she wants? Ning Yuan suddenly spoke in a cold tone. None of us stepped forward to help her just now. It's normal for her to refuse to help us. Gong Sun Zhao swallowed his words. Ning Yuan was an old-fashioned man. There were many things that he could not understand. However, he was very powerful. Moreover, the East Com dynasty was second only to the Baiming dynasty. Gong Sun Zhao did not want to offend him unless he had no other choice. Since things had already come to this, there was no need to argue anymore. It would save them the trouble of offending one more person. Tan Taichin felt very aggrieved when he realized that he could not pick a fight with Ning Yuan. However, like Gong Sun Zhao, he did not want to face Ning Yuan head-on. Therefore, he could only swallow his anger. The place fell into silence again. However, everyone was not as calm as they appeared to be. Originally, 5 people from each dynasty had gone in. Now that Sheng Guanyu had gone in, there was one more person. Most importantly, her strength was clearly much stronger than what they had previously expected. Once she joined, the entire Tianling dynasty's combat power would be greatly enhanced. Tan Taichin closed his eyes. Now, he could only hope that the other people from the Tianling dynasty had all been taken care of. In that case, it would be useless even if they went to Sheng Guanyu. Chu Luiyue passed through the barrier and entered the ancient Phoenix Mountain. As soon as she arrived, she immediately sensed that the heaven and earth origin force here was extremely dense. It was almost 3 times more than the outside world. As far as the eye could see, the mountain ranges rose and fell, tall and straight, and a long green river meandered through the mountains. It was truly a beautiful place with verdant hills and limpid waters. The scenery was pleasant. Other than that, he could also faintly hear the crisp chirping of birds coming from the forest, or occasionally see the silhouettes of magical beasts scurrying past. In short, no matter how one looked at it, it was a wonderful scene full of vitality. The ancient Phoenix Mountain was indeed worthy of being worshipped as a divine mountain by the Dark North Empire. Such a cultivation environment was indeed extremely rare. However, Chu Luiyue wasn't in the mood to appreciate these things. She raised her wrist, glanced at Jean Lingzi and began to search for their auras. Then she realized that Jean Lingzi was pointing in two different directions. This meant that the five of them were actually separated. Chu Luiyue was even more worried, and his brows were tightly knitted together. Before coming in, she had already told them that if possible, they must move together. Now that all five Jean Lingzi had shattered, they were scattered in two different directions. The situation was probably worse than she had expected. If she guessed correctly, Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou were on the left, and Mu Hongyu and the other two were on the right. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment, then chose the right direction. Besides the Jean Lingzi, Chang Wanzhou also had the whistle that Master had given him. He hadn't blown it yet, which meant that there was still a chance. Moreover, he and Jian Fengqi weren't weak, so Chu Luiyue was slightly relieved. The situation of Mu Hongyu and the other two was perhaps even worse. Then Chu Luiyue shouted, "Dumpling!" Whoosh, a red figure slowly appeared in front of her. Huge wings spread out and the pressure was overwhelming. Chu Luiyue leaped and jumped onto Dumpling's back. "Let's go!" At a pile of rocks in ancient Phoenix Mountain, Mu Hongyu and the other two were hiding behind a huge rock to rest. Although it was called a rest, it wasn't that relaxing, because the three of them were in terrible condition at this time. Wu Ming was seriously injured and unconscious, Yuan Jinghong was covered in blood, and Mu Hongyu was the least injured, and this was thanks to her special physique that allowed her to dodge quickly. Otherwise she would be almost the same as Wu Ming. "Do you still have the pills from before?" Mu Hongyu wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and asked. Yuan Jinghong leaned against the rock and shook his head with a pale face. No more. Before coming I only prepared so many, they've all been used up." Mu Hongyu bit her lip. "But Wu Ming can't hold on any longer. If it weren't for the two of them, Wu Ming wouldn't have been so seriously injured. For the past few days they had been using pills to keep him alive, but now the pills were gone. And the two of them, neither of them was a celestial physician, so they could only watch as his breath became weaker and weaker. For the two of them this was no different from torture." Yuan Jinghong laughed bitterly, his face full of helplessness and despair. "The three of us have crushed the Jean Lingzi one after another, but until now the two of them haven't come. They must have encountered some problems themselves. Because the three of them crushed the Jean Lingzi first, they didn't know the situation on Jian Fengqi's side. They also didn't know that the two of them had already crushed the Jean Lingzi." These words made the two of them fall into silence. If no one came, Wu Ming's body wouldn't be able to hold on for long, and the two of them might not be any better. "How long have we been here? It's only been 6 days, right?" Mu Hongyu suddenly opened her mouth and muttered in a daze. "If only Lu Yu was here, if she was here she would definitely have a way." Yuan Jinghong laughed bitterly again. The ancient Phoenix Mountain would only open again after 9 days. How could Chu Luiyue come in from the outside? It wasn't certain if they could hold on until then. If only Lu Yu was here she would definitely be able to take care of those people. Mu Hongyu's heart was filled with anger and unwillingness as she said this. "Oh, who are you talking about?" Suddenly a contemptuous laugh was heard. Mu Hongyu and Yuan Jinghong were both shocked and raised their heads. They saw a group of people walking out of the forest not far in front of them. It was Tantai Ruoli's group. After fighting for a few days and being seriously injured, Mu Hongyu and Yuan Jinghong's guard was lowered to the lowest. They only reacted when they saw the group in front of them. "You're haunting us." Mu Hongyu stood up abruptly and stood in front of them. "You've been chasing us for a few days. What are you trying to do? Didn't you say that we're going to chase after you?" Tantai Ruoli chuckled as a cold light flashed in her eyes. "I didn't realize that you have the faint Yuan body that only appears once in 1,000 years. It's a pity that you're going to be destroyed like this. If you want to blame someone, blame that Shangguan Yu of yours. You've provoked someone you shouldn't have." After she finished speaking, she flipped her palm and pushed it forward. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 963. Songsong. Mu Hongyu yelled, and the golden mane bear cub appeared in front of her in an instant, charging towards the palm energy. The golden mane bear cub was almost fully grown now. It was about the same size as an adult golden mane bear, and its strength was much stronger than before. It ran step by step and even the ground shook along with it. In the next moment, it used its body to collide head-on with that force. Bang! That force was instantly dispersed, and at the same time, Song Song's body flew out and landed heavily on the ground. Its brown fur, which glowed with a faint golden light, was stained with blood. Song Song. Mu Hongyu's heart felt like it was being squeezed tightly by something. Golden mane bear? Tantai Ruoli took a closer look and sneered. I thought it was some high-level magical beast. Just a golden mane bear, and it dares to embarrass itself? Mu Hongyu's eyes were red, and she gritted her teeth as she ran over. It crashed into a sharp rock and there was a long gash on its body. It was a ghastly sight. Mu Hongyu's hands were trembling slightly. She wanted to carry Tsong Tsong, but she didn't know where to start. Yuan Jinghong limped forward, his face full of anger. Aren't you afraid that people will find out about your despicable actions? It was supposed to be a fair competition for the various clans to enter ancient Phoenix Mountain, but the people from Taiyu Dynasty had been chasing after them ever since they entered. It was as if they wouldn't stop until they forced them to a dead end. You don't have to worry about that. Yu Zifeng, who was standing at the side, chuckled. As long as you stay here forever, who will know about this? Yuan Jinghong's heart sank completely. These people were so arrogant and impudent, and they didn't even try to hide it. They were determined to kill them all. There were 5 of them and they only had 3. One was unconscious and the other 2 were seriously injured. How could they win? In fact, after everyone came in, they all went their separate ways. The 3 of them relied on Jin Lingzi to find each other. They originally planned to meet up with Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou, but they didn't expect Qing Yaojin to appear halfway. The 5 people from Taiyu Dynasty began to surround and attack them. It was unknown what method they used, but they all gathered together in an extremely short period of time. 5 against 3, how could they win? Thus, after a few days of fighting, the situation on their side became worse and worse. Until now, he had almost no combat power left. There was one thing he was right about: as long as they all died here, who would know what had happened here? Tantai Ruoli waved his hand impatiently. There's no need to talk nonsense with them. Just get rid of them. There were still 2 more after him. Yu Zifeng smiled eagerly. Ruoli, you don't have to do anything to deal with these people. You just need to rest and watch from the side. Leave this to us. Tantai Ruoli couldn't help but smile with satisfaction. That's true. I don't want to dirty my hands. Then you guys should move faster. Don't worry. After Yu Zifeng finished speaking, he took a step forward with a cold, murderous look on his face. The few people behind him also stepped forward and quickly surrounded Mu Hongyu and the other 2. Such a scene was simply a hopeless situation. Yuan Jinghong glanced at Mu Hongyu and said in a low voice, Hongyu, I'll hold them back later. You take the opportunity to escape. Mu Hongyu had the faint Yuan body. Even if she couldn't defeat them, running away was definitely not a problem. But you, every one of you can escape. Yuan Jinghong interrupted her words and stared at her seriously. As long as you can escape, you can identify them. The 3 of them couldn't die here for nothing. Mu Hongyu clenched her fists and blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. Yu Zifeng ordered. The few of them attacked together. 4 forces flew out at the same time. There was no way to avoid it. Mu Hongyu and Yuan Jinghong were about to be killed on the spot. Yuan Jinghong quickly glanced at Mu Hongyu. Mu Hongyu's tears flowed out. The violent force around them was already closing in on them. A strong wind blew. Mu Hongyu closed her eyes tightly. She felt an unprecedented sense of despair. Just as she was about to make a move, the biting cold storm suddenly stopped. Mu Hongyu was stunned and opened her eyes. However, a red barrier had appeared in front of the 3 of them and blocked all the attacks. This was... Mu Hongyu stared blankly. Then, a ridiculous and bold idea came to her mind. This aura was obviously... Just at this moment, an extremely familiar voice came from the sky. They're my people. You, try touching them again. This clear and powerful voice was clearly transmitted into the ears of everyone present. In an instant, almost everyone raised their heads and looked over. In midair, a red-tailed phoenix spread its wings. Its tail was burning like flames and almost covered the sky. And standing on its back was a red-clothed woman. She was beautiful and unparalleled. It was Chu Luyue. She came with an unparalleled pressure. She was high and mighty, making people feel awe. Some people were born to be kings. Chu Luyue was such a person. Tantai Ruoli and the rest were shocked when they saw the person's face. Sheng Guanyu? Tantai Ruoli could not believe his eyes. Wasn't the ancient Phoenix Mountains barrier sealed? Where did this Shangguan Yu come from? The moment Mu Hongyu saw Chu Luiyue, her heart calmed down. It was as if as long as she was here, all problems would be solved. She quickly wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. She could not suppress the joy and excitement in her heart. Lu Yu. She could not help but pull Yuan Jinghong. It's her. It's really her. She really came. Yuan Jinghong hadn't reacted yet. He was at a loss. Her Majesty came personally? How did she come in? Shangguan Yu, you dare to sneak into ancient Phoenix Mountain. How presumptuous. Tantai Ruoli immediately scolded. This Shangguan Yu clearly said that she would not come in, but now she appeared again. The only explanation she could think of was that Shangguan Yu had snuck in from the beginning. It was just that she had been hiding in the dark and only showed up now. Chu Luiyue chuckled and held the long yuan sword in her hand tightly. Her slender and fair fingers slowly brushed across the simple and majestic black sword. Tantai Ruoli, I advise you to be careful with your words. This consort had openly and honorably split open the ancient Phoenix Mountains barrier to enter. Oh, forget it. It's useless to say this to you. Anyway, you won't have the chance to go out and spout nonsense. Chu Luiyue's eyes flashed with a cold light. Since you don't like the golden mane bear, then this mythical beast should be good enough for you. Dumpling. Tear her mouth apart. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 964. Just as she finished speaking, everyone saw a blazing red flame swooping down from the sky. It went straight for Tantai Ruoli. Tantai Ruoli was shocked. Even if she was not weak, she was definitely not a match for a divine beast. She didn't even think about it as she quickly retreated with the tip of her toes. At the same time, she threw out a 3-section whip. Soul-urging whip. Smack. A crisp sound of something breaking through the air was heard. The 3-section whip was completely black, and each section was tightly connected with a silver buckle. When she swung it, she could faintly hear some kind of sharp whistling sound. Dumpling's eyes were cold and indifferent. She looked at her as if she was looking at a clown. The 3-section whip did not slow down Dumpling's speed at all. It flapped its wings and left a few afterimages in the sky. In the blink of an eye, it was already above Tantai Ruoli's head. The distance between the human and the beast was quickly shortening. Sensing that the frightening pressure was getting closer and closer, Tantai Ruoli became more and more nervous, and a deep sense of fear welled up from the bottom of her heart. She hurriedly poured even more origin power into the 3-section whip. Bang! On the tip of the 3-section whip, many sharp thorns suddenly appeared. Under the sunlight, the thorns reflected a faint blue light. It was obviously dipped in poison. Just a slight touch. Dumpling's eyes turned sharp, and it immediately swung its claws and slapped the 3-section whip away. Bang! In the next moment, the 3-section whip was hit by the force and broke into countless pieces. At the same time, the red flame swept over and burned it into ashes. From the beginning to the end, it did not pose any threat to Dumpling at all. When the 3-section whip was snatched away, Tantai Ruoli was already terrified. When she saw this scene, her face turned even paler. She almost instinctively ran backward, but just as she took a step back, there was a fireball behind her. Boom boom boom. Dumpling flapped its wings and several flames flew out. They quickly exploded around Tantai Ruoli. In an instant, rocks were flying everywhere and sparks were flying everywhere. Tantai Ruoli felt as if the surrounding air was burning. The terrifying heat swept over and engulfed her. It was hard to break free. She quickly looked around, but to her despair, she found that she had nowhere to run. At this moment, she was undoubtedly meat on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Ruoli. Seeing this scene, Yu Zifeng and the rest instantly panicked and wanted to rush over to save her. But just as they tried to get close, they were blown away by the terrifying heat wave. How could the power of a divine beast be so easily? In a panic, Yu quickly looked at Chu Luiyue, who was standing at the side. At this moment, she was holding her sword with both hands and looking at the scene in front of her with a leisurely and indifferent expression. Shangguan Yu, do you dare to kill us? Once you get out, the Taiyu dynasty will not let you go. Yu Zifeng bellowed furiously. Chu Luiyue's gaze turned slightly, and she glanced at him in a seemingly smiling manner. As long as you stay here forever, no one will know about this, right? Speaking of which, this is what you taught me just now. Yu Zifeng was speechless, and the blood drained from his face. He was not stupid. He could tell that Shangguan Yu was planning to get rid of them completely. She was not joking, nor was she threatening them. She was serious. At this moment, Dumpling quickly closed in and slapped Tantai Ruoli's face with her claws. Tantai Ruoli let out a short cry and she fell to the ground, her face covered in blood. Ruoli. Princess. Yuzafeng and the rest saw this scene and their hearts almost stopped. Tantai Ruoli couldn't care less about the pain in her body. Almost immediately she touched her face. His hands were full of sweet and sticky blood. She could even feel the bloody scratches on her face. Especially on the left side of her mouth, there was a wound that went all the way to her cheekbone. She didn't need to look in the mirror to know how pathetic she looked now. My face. Tantai Ruoli's hand trembled and soon her entire body was shaking. She fell to the ground with her eyes wide open. Her face was filled with panic and despair and she kept vomiting blood. Tuanzi's claw had not only destroyed her face, but also almost destroyed half of the power in her body. Cultivators of the same level were usually inferior to magical beasts, not to mention her, who was not even a rank 8 warrior. How could she be compared to Dumpling? It was as easy as crushing dry weeds. Tuanzi flew back to Chu Liyue's side and obediently lowered its head. It looked at Chu Liyue eagerly as if it was asking for praise. Chu Liyue's lips curved up as she lightly patted Tuanzi's head. Well done. Dumpling squinted her eyes happily. Of course. It wasn't difficult to deal with such a small character. Chu Liyue looked down at her. I only asked you to tear her mouth, why did you destroy her entire face? That's not appropriate. Dumpling snorted. The rest was a gift. Didn't she look down on Song Song just now? She wanted to stand up for it. Chu Liyue couldn't help but laugh. She was such a busybody. She leaped and landed lightly in front of Mu Hongyu and the rest. Liu? Mu Hongyu couldn't hide her excitement and joy. She had many things to say but she knew that this wasn't the right time. They had more important things to do. Liu quickly take a look at Wu Ming. He's been unconscious for a few days. When Yuan Jinghong heard this, he also hurriedly agreed. The two of them could still hold on, but Wu Ming couldn't be delayed any longer. Don't worry. Chu Liyue nodded and walked quickly to Wu Ming's side. She first took his pulse and then frowned. Mu Hongyu and Yuan Jinghong's hearts jumped when they saw Chu Liyue's expression. Liu, how is he? Mu Hongyu asked worriedly. Chu Liyue took out a pill and fed it to Wu Ming. Then she looked at the other side calmly. At this moment, Tantai Ruoli was kneeling on the ground on the verge of death. Yuzafeng and the rest finally managed to bypass the burning flames with great difficulty and rushed to her side. Princess, how are you? They were shocked when they saw Tantai Ruoli's terrible condition. Yuzafeng quickly hugged her, shocked and angry. Quick, get the medicine. Oh, yes, medicine. We've already prepared for this. When the people beside him heard this, they hurriedly rummaged through it. Don't waste your energy. Chu Liyue said calmly. She gestured for Yuan Jinghong to take care of Wu Ming before she got up. There's no other medicine that can cure the injuries caused by the red-tailed phoenix except for the blood of a mythical beast. Yuzafeng and the rest were shocked when they heard this. Shengguan Yu, I didn't expect you to be so vicious. Chu Liyue ignored them. She thought about the injuries on Wu Ming and the other two and a murderous look appeared in her eyes. She raised her eyes slightly to look at Tuanzi and said calmly, don't leave a single one alive. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 965. Screech. A clear screech reverberated through the air. Dumpling's figure flashed and 2 balls of red flames flew out rapidly. Boom, boom, boom. The few of them were already gathered together, so it was much more convenient for them to attack now. After a series of earth-shattering explosions, the few of them were once again set ablaze with ferocious flames. It even formed a huge semicircular barrier, trapping all of them within. They were going to burn them alive. Sensing the danger, Yuzafeng and the rest panicked. Shengguan Yu? How dare you? Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Whether I dare or not, didn't you see it clearly for yourselves? The flames were already right in front of them, but they were still shouting uselessly. These people from the Taiyu dynasty were indeed only capable of this much. Actually, Chu Liyue didn't want to kill them at first, but after arriving here she realized that Wu Ming and the rest were severely injured, especially Wu Ming. If she had arrived any later, the 3 of them would have lost their lives here. The other party had surrounded them first and forced them to a dead end without caring about anything else, and they weren't even allowed to retaliate? There was no such logic anywhere in the world. Yuzafeng was choked speechless. At this moment Tantai Ruoli moaned in pain again. She looked like she would rather die than live. The most shocking thing was that the injuries on her face and body seemed to be festering at a speed visible to the naked eye. This medicine, our medicine, is really useless. A man next to him shouted in panic. He had clearly fed her medicine just now, but unexpectedly, Tantai Ruoli's injuries didn't improve at all. Instead, they worsened. Yuzufeng clenched his fists and the veins on his forehead popped out. It seemed that Shangguanyu wasn't lying. Injuries caused by a divine beast really couldn't be healed by ordinary medicine. Tantai Ruoli curled up into a ball, almost fainting from the pain. At this moment she didn't even have the strength to glare at Chu Luiyue. How many people could withstand the fatal blow of a mythological beast? Right at this moment, the body of another person next to him was stained with a few sparks, which then quickly burned up. He hurriedly tried to extinguish the flames on his body, but was shocked to find that ordinary methods were useless against the flames. Time passed quickly. They were trapped in the flame cage. It was as if they had fallen into hell. They had no way to break free. Zifeng, what do we do now? Now that Tantai Ruoli was seriously injured, he could only listen to Yuzufeng. But what could Yuzufeng do? There was no use in threatening them. Shangguanyu was determined to take their lives. Beg for mercy? He was afraid that he would die even faster. Chu Luiyue rarely went on a killing spree like this. However, since the other party had already bullied him, there was no need for him to endure any longer. What's more, the ancient Phoenix Mountains environment was sealed off. Was there anything more suitable than closing the door and beating the dog? Cough, cough. Wu Ming, who had been unconscious for a long time, suddenly coughed. Yuan Jinghong was surprised and happy at the same time. Wu Ming, you're awake? Wu Ming slowly opened his eyes. Because of the dazzling sunlight, he closed his eyes again. After a while, he finally adapted to his surroundings and gradually saw the scene in front of him. Startled. Startled? Wu Ming still didn't understand what was going on. When he saw Yuan Jinghong's haggard and blood-stained face, his heart skipped a beat. Run. Run, Yuan Jinghong hurriedly said. Don't worry, His Majesty is here to save us. Wu Ming was stunned for a while. He turned his head with difficulty and saw the familiar figure of a woman not far away. Further away there seemed to be a few people trapped in a raging fire. He could vaguely hear hysterical screams. That sounded like, they're from the Taiyu dynasty. Yuan Jinghong explained. Wu Ming was even more confused. What was going on? At this time, Chu Luiyue also turned around and smiled faintly at Wu Ming. Your internal organs are injured and your vitality is greatly damaged. You need to recuperate. Don't worry about these things. I will take care of it. Wu Ming didn't have time to ask Chu Luiyue how he appeared in this ancient Phoenix Mountain. He said with difficulty, Your Majesty, those people. There's something on them? Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. What is it? Wu Ming shook his head. His face was even paler. They seem to be able to communicate with each other, and outside, although his breath was weak and he was stammering, Chu Luiyue instantly understood. You mean there's something on them that allows them to communicate with each other and Tan Taichen outside can also know? Wu Ming nodded vigorously. Mu Hongyu suddenly thought of something. I see. It's because of this that they can gather together so quickly. They had Jin Lingzi. They thought that the gathering speed was already very fast, but the people of Taiyu dynasty were even faster. This was indeed abnormal. Yuan Jinghong was suddenly shocked and looked at Chu Luiyue. Your Majesty, if that's the case, then if we kill them, won't the people outside know immediately? His Majesty just came in and the people of Taiyu dynasty were killed. This was strange no matter how one looked at it. Chu Luiyue's eyes moved slightly. In fact, this was nothing. Everything was based on evidence. If there was no evidence, even if Tan Taichen was sure that it was her, he couldn't do anything. The key was, she didn't know what they used and whether they left any clues. Chu Luiyue turned around. Tuanzi had a telepathic connection with her and immediately stopped. However, the layer of flame barrier outside was not removed. At this time, the few people in the fire had fallen into deep despair. Zifeng, the princess, fainted. What should we do now? This fire is very powerful. We can't rush out at all. Are we really going to wait for death here? Yu Zifeng gritted his teeth. Even if we die, we can't let Shangguanyu get away with it. This debt must be placed on her head. His mind raced. Then he seemed to have made up his mind. No matter what, we have to pass this news to His Majesty. As long as the people outside knew that Shangguanyu was behind this, they would be in deep trouble even if they escaped. When the people beside him heard this, they looked at each other and nodded vigorously. Yu Zifeng closed his eyes and extended his hand with his palm facing up. A moment later, a strange rune appeared in the middle of his palm. The others did the same one after another. Other than the unconscious Tantai Ruoli and the half-dead young man, Yu Zifeng and the other two were left. Black runes appeared in the hands of the three of them. Soon, the runes in their hands floated up and gathered in the middle to form a new rune the size of a palm. However, this rune seemed to be missing two pieces and looked incomplete. So, this is what you rely on. Just as the three of them were about to activate the rune, Chu Liyue's lazy voice suddenly rang out. The few of them were shocked. When they looked up, they saw that the fire in front of them had split in the middle. Chu Liyue was standing not far away. She was looking at them with a faint smile. She fixed her gaze on the rune and narrowed her eyes dangerously. Why does this thing look so familiar? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 966. Almost instantly, Chu Liyue recognized the black rune. Wasn't this the same rune that was formed by the soul that was hiding in Shangguanwan's body? Although this rune was missing two pieces, it could still be recognized at a glance. Her lips curled into a cold smile. I didn't expect you to be related to the Black Demon Cave. What Black Demon Cave? What nonsense are you talking about? Yu Zifeng immediately retorted. However, he felt a little weak in his heart. Shangguanyu. Why did she seem to know what this was? Back then, His Majesty took out this rune and divided it into 5 parts, which were hidden in their bodies. At that time, he only said that this was a precious item that he had found, which could be used to communicate with each other in ancient Phoenix Mountain. If anything happened, it could also send out an alarm. Furthermore, every single rune contained an extremely powerful force that could be used to protect oneself. Yu Zifeng remembered clearly that His Majesty had once said that this item had a great origin and that ordinary people would not be able to recognize it. However, at the same time, he also cautioned that unless it was absolutely necessary, they should not gather the rune. According to His Majesty, it was impossible for others to recognize this item. However, Shangguanyu only took a glance at it. How did she recognize it? The expression on her face did not seem to be lying. You don't want to admit it? Chu Liyue sneered, but the corners of her eyes were cold. She really didn't expect that she would encounter something related to the Black Demon Cave here. Even if Yu Zifeng and the others did not know what was going on, Tan Taichen definitely knew. She really could not tell that this old fox had such a trick up his sleeve. Chu Liyue held the Dragon Abyss sword tightly, raised it high and slashed it directly. In an instant, it was as if a dragon's roar resounded through heaven and earth. Fear appeared in the eyes of Yu Zifeng and the others. Quick! Hurry up and activate the rune. Yu Zifeng hurriedly shouted. Even if the rune was not neatly assembled, it would still be slightly useful if it was activated now. The few of them hurriedly activated the force in their bodies. Black flames burned at the edge of the black rune. A cold and gloomy aura spread out from it. Just as he finished speaking, a piercingly cold sword chi suddenly flew over. A teeth-numbing cracking sound rang out. The rune that had just been put together was directly split into 2 by the Long Yuan sword. Boom! The 2 forces collided fiercely, forming a terrifying turbulence that swept out in all directions. Gravel flew everywhere and the ground caved in. Chu Liyue flicked his wrist and thousands of sword chi flew out from the Long Yuan sword. Direct strangulation. Yu Zifeng had just shouted out a single word when a bloody hole appeared on his neck. His eyes widened. Blood gushed out of the wound and soon dyed the front of his clothes red. Then, his body stiffened and he collapsed completely. The 2 people beside him wanted to save him, but they couldn't even take care of themselves. Soon, 2 cries of pain could be heard as the 2 of them collapsed one after the other. As for the black flame on the black rune, it was silently extinguished before completely dissipating. Dumpling flapped its wings. Strong winds blew everywhere. Red flames swept over and completely engulfed the few people. Not long after, the few people were completely turned into ashes in the flames and dissipated with the wind. Almost at the same time, Tan Taichen, who was waiting outside the barrier, suddenly stood up. His eyes widened in shock. His lips were pale and his back was covered in cold sweat. That was... He looked at his palm in disbelief. A faint rune appeared, but before it could fully appear, it dissipated with a loud bang. Tan Taichen seemed to have been struck by lightning. His vision turned black and his legs went soft. He staggered a few steps and almost fell to the ground. Brother Tan Tai, what happened to you? Gong Sun Xiao and Ning Yuan noticed the situation and immediately looked over. Seeing Tan Taichen's expression, they realized that something must have happened. Tan Taichen seemed to have not heard anything and was completely stunned. 5 people were all dead? How was this possible? They were clearly, not long ago he was still fantasizing that Ruoli and the others would be able to achieve good results this time. At that time he would show everyone how powerful their Taiyu dynasty was. But in the blink of an eye the 5 people were all gone. They didn't even have time to leave behind the last clue. The feeling of being pierced by thousands of arrows was nothing more than this. Tan Taichen's eyes were bloodshot. As if he had gone mad, he suddenly charged toward the colorful barrier. Elder Hua Qian frowned and waved his sleeve to stop him. Tan Taichen, what are you doing? Are you going to force your way into the ancient Phoenix Mountain like Shangguanyu? Hearing that name, Tan Taichen suddenly raised his head. His eyes were about to pop out. It's her. It must be her. Inside the barrier, the last spark was extinguished. At the original location of the few people, there were only traces left behind by the energy collision. If someone came, they would probably only think that a great battle had broken out here, but they wouldn't know who had died here. Chu Liyue slowly put away the Dragon Abyss sword, but he was still thinking about the last scene of those people. What was the relationship between Taiyu dynasty and the Black Demon Cave? After thinking for a while he still couldn't figure it out. He probably had to ask Tan Taichen. Chu Liyue simply put away this thought and turned to look at Mu Hongyu and the others. Slap. Before Chu Liyue could finish speaking, a hoarse and low voice sounded in his ear. Tiske, what a vicious and merciless woman. Chu Liyue suddenly turned around. Jun Jiuqing. Digression, 6 p.m., mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 967. No one knew when he had appeared here. He was wearing a long dark green robe, which made him look even more handsome and demonic. Especially those eyes that were faintly blood red, like a demon or an immortal. They were extremely dangerous, as if they could completely devour people at any time. The corners of his lips were slightly raised, containing a smile, but it was unfathomable. It seemed that he had been here for a while. Chu Liyue's mind raced. Jun Jiuqing had most likely seen everything that had just happened. But perhaps because he was too strong, his aura was hidden very well, so no one had noticed him before. Mu Hongyu and the others were all shocked when they saw Jun Jiuqing suddenly appear. What would they do if he told everyone about this? One had to know that Prince Baiming's words were absolutely powerful testimony. Both sides fell into a short silence, as if even the air had frozen. After a while, Chu Liyue naturally put away the long yuan sword in his hand and smiled faintly at Jun Jiuqing. Your Highness, I didn't expect to meet you here. What a coincidence. Jun Jiuqing looked at the girl in front of him. She had coincidentally seen the burning of the corpse, but her expression didn't change at all. She was indeed exactly the same as before. Even if she changed her physical body and face, her temperament and character would still be the same. Thinking of this, Jun Jiuqing couldn't help but laugh. Yes. I was just walking around and noticed that there was movement here, so I came to take a look. I didn't expect to bump into a good show. He touched his chin. If I'm not mistaken, Tan Taichin should have known by now, right? If it were anyone else it wouldn't matter. But Tantai Ruoli was his only daughter and the apple of his eye. If he knew his precious daughter was killed in the ancient Phoenix Mountain, what would his expression be? Chu Liyue's face was calm. How would I know what expression he would have? If your Highness is so concerned about him, it would be better to go out and comfort him. However, we still have things to do, so we won't talk much. Your Highness, please go ahead. As she spoke, she directly turned around and lifted her chin at Mu Hongyu and the others. Let's go. After speaking, she actually lifted her feet and walked forward. Anyway, Jun Jiuqing had seen it, so there was nothing to argue about. Moreover, she didn't think that this person was someone who could be negotiated with. So she simply said nothing. Jun Jiuqing raised his brows slightly as his figure moved and blocked Chu Liyue's path. Aren't you afraid that I will accidentally say something? I don't care about the others, but this is the order of the eldest princess of the country. If she was careless, it would cause a dispute. She really didn't care? Chu Liyue looked up slightly, and a cold smile appeared on her lips. Your Highness, the Crown Prince wants to use this to threaten me? Don't you think it's unnecessary? Her father was trapped in his hands. Why would she care about this? Jun Jiuqing was stunned. Then he couldn't help but laugh. You're quite open-minded. Chu Liyue couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. She directly turned around and planned to walk around him. If it weren't for the fact that she had been to the study and seen that scene, she would definitely have fought with Jun Jiuqing. However, she obviously couldn't do it now. Mu Hongyu and the others looked at each other. Previously, Jun Jiuqing acted as if he knew Chu Luiyue. Now, it seemed that there was something wrong. However, seeing that Chu Luiyue didn't want to say anything more and directly left, the three of them didn't say anything and just followed silently. Wu Ming's injuries were the most serious. Mu Hongyu and Yuan Jinghong each supported him and walked forward. Your Highness. At this moment, another shout came from mid-air. Then a few figures quickly landed in front of Jun Jiuqing. They were the other 4 people from the Baiming dynasty. Your Highness, you walked too fast just now. I had to chase after you for a while before I could catch up. Please forgive me, Your Highness. One of the young men said while panting. Although the others didn't say anything, they seemed to be in the same condition. It was obvious that they had spent a lot of effort to rush here. These people were considered top geniuses. However, compared to Jun Jiuqing, they were still far behind. Jun Jiuqing smiled evilly. He didn't seem to care. It's fine. Chu Luiyue heard this and narrowed her eyes. However, she didn't stop walking. She continued to lead the others forward. It was obvious that she didn't want to be involved in their business. Your Highness, are they from the Tianling dynasty? They finally realized that Jun Jiuqing had been looking at the people who were leaving. Only then did they focus their attention. Isn't that Sheng Guanyu? One of the young men couldn't help but mumble. Although they had only seen her once or twice, she was too eye-catching. No matter where she stood, she would become the focus of everyone's attention. I clearly remember that she said she wouldn't come in. Did she change her mind in the end? That can't be right. I've seen the other 2 people from the Tianling dynasty before. They've been here since the beginning. Another person retorted. As soon as he said that, the others realized that something was wrong and looked at each other. That's right. They had been here for a few days. Moreover, they had seen 5 people from the Tianling dynasty before this. Among them, there wasn't any Sheng Guanyu. How did she appear here? The few of them were puzzled. However, Chu Luiyue and the others didn't seem to have any intention of explaining. Forget it. Let's not talk about this for now. Everything will be clear once we get out. The young man standing at the front retracted his gaze and scanned the surroundings. His expression became serious. Your Highness, what happened here just now? Why is it like this? The ground was full of gravel, the ground had collapsed, and there were messy blood stains. Anyone who saw it would know that a great battle had just taken place here. Previously, it seemed like the people from the Taiyu dynasty were coming here. Why didn't I see them? Yes. Weren't they chasing after the people from the Tianling dynasty? The only woman among them took 2 steps to the side. She looked vigilant as if she wanted to investigate carefully. This doesn't seem like a mark left behind by ordinary flames. She carefully examined the scorched ground and looked up at Chu Luiyue and the others. Her eyes were full of undisguised suspicion. Could it be that the people from the Taiyu dynasty and the Tianling dynasty were fighting just now? When Mu Hongyu and the others heard this, they all froze. Although they had done it very discreetly, it was inevitable that some traces would be left behind. This woman was so powerful. She only took a few glances and quickly made a deduction. If they didn't draw the line now, when they found out that the people from the Taiyu dynasty were all dead, they would definitely associate it with them. Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks and turned around. Just as she was about to say something, Jun Jiuqing spoke first. He smiled lazily and said, That's right. That's right. The good show just now was indeed a fight between the 2 sides. Chu Luiyue's hands suddenly clenched in her sleeves. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 968. There was a moment of dead silence. Jun Jiuqing didn't seem to notice the change in the atmosphere at all. He only narrowed his eyes, which were like a pair of crescent moons, emitting specks of red light. Unfortunately, Taiyu's group was too incompetent. They couldn't even defeat a divine beast, so they fled in a hurry. Chu Luiyue's hand slowly loosened and his palm was sweaty. Mu Hongyu and the rest also heaved sighs of relief without any change in their expressions. Fortunately, you said that the people from Taiyu dynasty were chased away by a divine beast? The woman seemed to be very surprised and there was a hint of doubt in her eyes. Jun Jiuqing chuckled. Red-tailed red phoenix, don't you recognize it? The few of them looked over and indeed saw a palm-sized crimson fiend nestled on Sheng Guanyu's shoulder. Judging from its size, it seemed to be the legendary red-tailed red phoenix. Yes, there seems to be a rumor saying that that person contracted a divine beast. Another young man couldn't help but mutter softly. The Baiming dynasty and the Tianling dynasty were far apart, and the two sides rarely interacted with each other. However, they would more or less know about the major events that happened in the surrounding dynasties. Especially after knowing that the crown prince had personally invited the people from the Tianling dynasty to the ancient Phoenix Mountain this time, they were even more curious and discussed it in private. Among them, the one that was discussed the most was naturally the new Tianling emperor in front of them, Shangguanyu. After all, everything about her was too amazing. With the help of such a divine beast, it was no wonder that they could defeat the people from Taiyu dynasty. Hearing this, the woman looked carefully again. Qing Dai, this seems to be the mark left behind by the red-tailed red phoenix. The young man beside her whispered. Qing Dai nodded, but she still frowned, feeling that something was wrong. However, since the crown prince had already said so, there was nothing to doubt. Thus, she could only suppress the doubts in her heart. It's just a small matter, Your Highness. Chu Luiyue spoke in a very polite tone. He was like a completely different person from before. Jun Jiuqing's smile deepened. Although she was smiling and her attitude was polite, he didn't need to think to know that she was cursing him fiercely in her heart. In front of so many people, there were still many things to consider. Thinking of this, Jun Jiuqing's mood immediately improved. Not at all. I was bored staying on the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Encountering this matter just so happened to relieve my boredom. He was probably the only one here who could say such words so casually. Chu Luiyue knew that he was referring to her. She narrowed her eyes dangerously, but in the end, she suppressed her emotions. After these few tests, he was basically sure that there was something wrong with Jun Jiuqing. And it wasn't a small problem. Unless it was absolutely necessary, it was best to avoid contact with such people. She raised her eyebrows slightly and laughed as well. It's good that Your Highness doesn't mind. However, we have important matters to attend to and can't delay any longer. We'll take our leave first. After saying that, she cupped her hands and left with Mu Hongyu and the others. She was straightforward and didn't hesitate at all. Jun Jiuqing snorted softly. How could it be so easy to get rid of him? Qing Dai glanced at Jun Jiuqing from the corner of her eye and was slightly stunned. He was looking at the backs of the few people who were leaving. His expression was as lazy and evil as usual. However, those mesmerizing eyes of his seemed to have a focus at this moment. He was looking at one of the people. Almost instantly, Qing Dai immediately guessed that he was looking at Shangguanyu. In fact, from the beginning, she had already sensed that the crown prince treated that woman very differently. He seemed to have known her for a long time, and his attitude towards her was exceptionally benevolent. If it was someone else who spoke to him like this, he would definitely not have such a reaction. And those who were not pleasing to the eye might be half dead if things didn't go well. However, Shangguanyu was different. Everyone could tell that although she seemed to be respectful to the crown prince, that was not the case. In fact, she even seemed to be avoiding the crown prince. However, he didn't seem to care about that at all. In fact, he even indulged her. Moreover, he had never looked at anyone else with that kind of gaze. Qing Dai didn't know how to describe this feeling, but she could clearly feel it. Could it be, Qing Dai, what are you thinking about? Someone beside her asked curiously. She quickly lowered her eyes and hurriedly suppressed her thoughts. She forced a smile. Nothing. I'm just thinking that it's really enviable to be able to contract with a divine beast. The few people beside her didn't notice her abnormality and nodded in agreement. That's right. Even in our Baiming dynasty, it's extremely rare to have a divine beast. This is really due to luck, right? I heard that she was killed by someone. Later on, I don't know how, but she actually came back alive. I don't think the word luck can describe this. I've heard some rumors as well. It seems like she was forced to a dead end by her fiancé and sister. In the end, she chose to kill herself. Speaking of which, it's quite tragic. Are you done? The few of them were discussing in low voices when Jun Jiuqing's cold voice suddenly sounded and interrupted their conversation. When they looked up, Jun Jiuqing was still smiling. However, there seemed to be wind and frost gathering in between his eyebrows, which sent chills down their spines. This was a sign that he was about to get angry. Yes, I'm done. I'm at fault. I shouldn't have said so much. Your Highness, please forgive us. The few of them realized that something was wrong and hurriedly admitted their mistakes. However, Jun Jiuqing's face was still very gloomy. Next time if I hear these words again, I won't be able to keep your tongues. Yes. The few of them did not expect Jun Jiuqing to be so angry all of a sudden. They were a little flustered for a moment. At the same time, they finally realized that Shangguan Yu was not someone to be trifled with. They did not know why His Highness treated her like this. Qing Dai pursed her lips and looked down to hide the sadness in her eyes. Jun Jiuqing looked up at the sky and narrowed his eyes. It's almost time. Chu Luiyue and the rest of them walked for quite a distance. After making sure that they had completely separated from the rest of the people, they finally stopped by a river to rest. First, she roughly treated the wounds on their bodies and distributed some pills to each of them. Fortunately, she had a lot of pills in her universe ring, so it was much more convenient for her. Lu Yu, why do you have so many pills with you? Mu Hongyu swallowed the pills and circulated her force according to the method Chu Luiyue taught her. As expected, she felt much better. She could not help but ask. Although she was a celestial physician, she still had a lot of things with her. Chu Luiyue blinked his eyes and gently rotated the universe ring. A smile bloomed on his lips. Actually, I didn't pack a lot of things. Most of them were prepared by Rong Xiu. Digression: Rong Xiu, a must-have man for home and travel. Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 969. The cosmic ring that he had given her previously contained almost all kinds of items. There was no lack of precious pills and treasures among them. It was just the right time to use them. Mu Hongyu chuckled. I've long said that King Li treats you differently. Tell me, was it because of you that Prince Li moved to the academy? If he didn't care about her, how could he be so considerate and considerate? Chu Luiyue bent her fingers and lightly knocked her forehead. If you have the time to think about this, why don't you recuperate and recover your strength? That way we can find Jian Fengqi and little Zhou as soon as possible. At the mention of this, Mu Hongyu and company's expressions became serious. They had been pursued by the people from the Taiyu dynasty, so they didn't know what happened to those two. Lu Yu, we've already crushed our Jin Lingzi. We can't contact them. How's your side? Chu Luiyue rubbed the Jin Lingzi on his wrist as his eyes narrowed. The two of them also crushed their Jin Lingzi after you guys. It's also because of this that I forced my way in. What? The few of them looked at each other and realized the seriousness of the matter. Chu Luiyue looked up and glanced in a certain direction. They should still be there. I don't know how the situation is. Let's rest for a while before rushing over. The two of them are very strong. How could they? Yuan Jinghong frowned, puzzled. Besides, we're in such a sorry state because we've been pursued by the people from the Taiyu dynasty since the beginning. But how could the two of them? Could it be that they encountered the same situation as us? A total of 5 dynasties came in. After some calculations, the only ones who might attack them are probably from the East Com dynasty. Chu Luiyue shook his head. We can't make a conclusion without seeing it with our own eyes. Besides, there might be danger everywhere on ancient Phoenix Mountain. That being said, Chu Luiyue wasn't too optimistic. Needless to say, Xiao Zhou grew up in the southern border, so he should be able to move around freely in a place like this. As for Jian Fengqi, he was lazy and carefree. If he could win a fight, he would fight. If he couldn't, he would run. He was someone who would never allow himself to be in danger. To be able to force the two of them into such a desperate situation, it was probably not an ordinary problem. However, Chu Luiyue did not say this out loud. He just tried his best to let the three of them recover. Mu Hongyu's condition was the best. She only had some superficial wounds which didn't affect her much. One of Yuan Jinghong's legs was broken. Chu Luiyue helped him reattach it, bandaged it, and fed him medicine. Although his legs were not nimble, he was still in good spirits. The most serious one was Wu Ming. In order to save Mu Hongyu and Yuan Jinghong, he had suffered too many injuries. Among them, the most important was that his spleen was severely ruptured. This directly led to the loss of a piece of the 5 treasures that he had worked so hard to open up, making it difficult to connect the circulation of the force in his body. This was an immeasurable blow to a cultivator. The 5 treasures that he had worked so hard to establish were suddenly missing a part of them. It would have a great impact on his recovery and future cultivation. It was even very likely that he would not be able to move forward. However, Wu Ming himself was very open-minded about this matter. Thank you, Your Majesty. I'm already very lucky to be able to keep my life. I don't dare to hope for anything else. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at him disapprovingly. You don't care, but I do. I originally brought you here to let you take the opportunity to improve your strength, not to throw away your lives. If you were to become crippled, wouldn't that be a great loss for me? Wu Ming knew that she was consoling him and could not help but laugh bitterly. However, the 5 treasures are bound together for good or ill. How can they be repaired properly? Chu Luiyue laughed softly. This body of mine used to have a damaged yuan meridian and was a genuine good for nothing. Isn't it fine now? It's not like your 5 treasures are all damaged. It's just a part of them. It's not a big problem. Wu Ming was somewhat skeptical. Is your majesty speaking the truth? Chu Luiyue looked up slightly. Her dark jade-like eyes were calm and reassuring. That trace of worry in Wu Ming's heart suddenly vanished into thin air. He pursed his lips. I'll listen to your majesty's arrangements. Only then did Chu Luiyue nod in satisfaction. Rest first. After 2 days, when you've recovered slightly, you can undergo further treatment. Thank you, your majesty. Chu Luiyue smiled. She suddenly thought of something and asked, Did you 6 days ago? Did you encounter any fortuitous encounters? They all shook their heads. Not long after we entered, we were chased by those people from the Taiyu dynasty. We couldn't care less about anything else. Chu Luiyue agreed. When their lives were at stake, how could they care about such things? But, Yuan Jinghong said hesitantly, I feel that the density of force on this mountain seems to be much thinner than when we first arrived. Yes, I have the same feeling. Mu Hongyu quickly nodded in agreement. Chu Luiyue was somewhat surprised. Are you sure? When she entered, she found that the density of force here was several times higher than outside. How could it be thinner than before? Then how terrifying was it at the very beginning? As if seeing through Chu Luiyue's thoughts, Yuan Jinghong explained. Actually, it's not that the force has become thinner everywhere. He scratched his head as if he didn't know how to describe it. Then he patted his head and pointed in another direction. Look over there, Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. Yuan Jinghong was referring to the highest and most precipitous mountain here. And the top of the mountain seemed to have been shaved off by something. It was very neat and flat. At this moment, they were still several mountain peaks away from the other side. The main peak of Ancient Phoenix Mountain? Chu Luiyue knew that that was the real Ancient Phoenix Mountain. It was also the place where Dark North Taizu successfully broke through and entered the God Realm. The reason why that mountain was flat was said to be because of that Dark North Taizu's palm. Yes, that's it. These few days, all the force seems to be rushing towards that place. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat and she closed her eyes. She used her divine sense to check the surroundings carefully. The vast mountain range was filled with rich force of heaven and earth. At this moment, it seemed to be attracted by some kind of force. It was slowly but surely moving towards that mountain peak. After a moment, she opened her eyes and nodded seriously. That's right. The force of heaven and earth is indeed rushing towards that place. If I'm not wrong, 3 elements as one will appear on that mountain peak in 9 days. That's right. I almost forgot about that. Yuan Jinghong laughed a little embarrassedly. Mu Hongyu looked around and hesitantly asked, What's wrong? Luyu, that's the opposite direction from where Jian Fengqi and the others are. Which direction should we go first? Chu Luiyue said without hesitation. Let's find them first. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 970. Ancient Phoenix Mountain's main peak was 3 essences as one. When the time came, the closer they were, the more benefits they would receive. If they were lucky enough, they would be able to receive an endless amount of force and break through directly. Of course, the most important point was that the secret of the northern underworld Taizu entering the divine realm was very likely to be hidden on that main peak. Even if they were able to get a glimpse of it, it would be extremely beneficial. Which cultivator in the world would not want to reach a higher level? This was undoubtedly a huge temptation. However, Chu Luiyue still chose to look for Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou without hesitation. Mu Hongyu knew her the best. When they were in the academy, they had experienced life and death together. Hence, she was not surprised to see her make such a decision. She only nodded vigorously. However, Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming were still a little surprised. If it were someone else, they might not have made such a choice. After all, Ancient Phoenix Mountain only opened once every 1,000 years. Such an opportunity was truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. However, she still made such a choice. It was impossible to say that they were not touched. However, Chu Luiyue did not seem to care much about this. She only treated it as an ordinary choice. Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming looked at each other and saw the surging emotions in each other's eyes. However, the two of them did not say anything and tacitly quieted down. After resting for a while, Chu Luiyue stood up. Dumpling. Swoosh. With the sound of wings flapping, Dumpling quickly returned to its original size from a small bird. Chu Luiyue took the lead and jumped up, then called for the other 3 to follow. When all of them were standing on Dumpling's back, Chu Luiyue patted Dumpling's head lightly. "Let's go." Dumpling flapped its wings and rose up. It quickly flew forward. The red figure streaked across the sky like a burning line of fire, quickly spreading into the distance. About an hour later, Chu Luiyue felt that Jean Lingzi's special aura was getting stronger. Her expression turned cold. They were almost there. She looked down and saw that there was a rugged canyon between the two mountains. There were two familiar figures in the canyon. Her heart stirred slightly. Screech! Dumpling let out a clear cry and quickly swooped down. But when they were about to reach the bottom, they suddenly encountered an invisible resistance. Dumpling's speed had obviously slowed down. "Evacuate quickly. There's something strange about this space." Mu Hongyu suddenly spoke. Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming looked confused. "What's strange?" Mu Hongyu pointed downwards with a serious expression. "The space of this inverted canyon seems to have been disturbed by some kind of power and has become somewhat chaotic." "Chaos?" Yuan Jinghong took a closer look. The mountains rose and fell and the peaks were beautiful. Occasionally, a breeze would blow past, rustling the forest. "This doesn't seem to be a problem." However, Chu Luiyue knitted her brows slightly and said, "That's right. Dumpling, retreat." Dumpling heard this and immediately flapped its wings and quickly flew upwards. Soon, the invisible resistance disappeared. Dumpling circled above the canyon. Chu Luiyue confirmed something and turned to look at Mu Hongyu. "Hongyu, you said that this space is chaotic. What do you mean?" Mu Hongyu's eyes widened. "Didn't you notice that the power of space here is different?" A dark light flashed in Chu Luiyue's eyes. She only vaguely felt that something was wrong, but her feeling was not as clear as Mu Hongyu's. Suddenly, her expression changed slightly. "You have the faint Yuan body, and your control of space is far superior to ordinary people. This is probably why you can feel this." Mu Hongyu was stunned. "Is that so?" Ever since she knew that she had the faint Yuan body, her biggest understanding of herself was that she could teleport. In her mind, the stronger her strength, the further the distance she could teleport. She was not too sure about other things. At this moment, if not for Chu Luiyue pointing it out, she would not have realized that she had such a characteristic. She had always thought that everyone was about the same. That's right. It should be because your strength has increased a lot now, so your sensitivity to space has also increased. That's why you can clearly feel the abnormality in that space. Chu Luiyue nodded affirmatively. When the other two heard this, they suddenly understood and expressed their agreement. Among these people, only Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu had not broken through to become rank 7 warriors. However, Mu Hongyu's talent and advantage in this area were obviously far superior to others. "What else did you feel? Tell me in detail." Chu Luiyue said as she looked down with a serious expression. When they approached earlier, she had already confirmed their identities. Logically speaking, when they flew down they made quite a bit of noise, so the two of them should have noticed it. But until now, the two of them had not even raised their heads. This made Chu Luiyue quite worried. Upon hearing that, Mu Hongyu nodded and pointed at the canyon below. "Let's make an analogy. Where we are now, the space is stable like a piece of paper that has been evenly dyed with a color. But down there, it's filled with different spatial powers intertwining and entangling with each other. It's the same piece of paper, but it's a mess of colors." As she spoke, she pointed to different positions. "There, it's a single piece. Beside it, there are two small spaces squeezing each other. As for the other side, although it's a complete space, it's different from the others." Even though Chu Luiyue and the rest couldn't sense it completely like Mu Hongyu, they could understand a little from her description. "So, just this canyon alone is filled with at least 6 to 7 different spatial powers?" Yuan Jinghong asked in surprise. Mu Hongyu touched her chin. "You can say that, but the actual situation is even more troublesome than this. Because these different spaces will squeeze and compete with each other, making the atmosphere of this entire space even worse. If we go in now, it will definitely be very dangerous." Then Feng Qi and the two of them were right below. But at this moment, they seemed to be sitting cross-legged on the ground with a distance between them. "I don't know what they're doing. So they're in a critical situation now. They're probably trapped there and can't get out." As Mu Hongyu spoke, she looked at Chu Luiyue. "Liu, what do you think we should do next?" Chu Luiyue stared at the scene below and fell into deep thought. Even though she couldn't sense it as clearly as Mu Hongyu from the resistance just now, it was indeed harder to deal with than expected. To be able to stop Dumpling, it was enough to imagine how terrifying the power contained in this intertwining space was. At this moment, a sharp whistle was suddenly blown, rising with the wind. It was Chang Wanzhou blowing the whistle that Yuchi-song gave the two of them back then. He's asking for help. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 971. He must have encountered an even more dangerous situation. Chu Liwei frowned and looked over. Chang Wanzhou was blowing his whistle as he struggled to stand up and walk forward. He seemed to want to leave the canyon. But just as he took a step, his legs went weak and he fell to the ground. He didn't move. Only the whistle lingered in the sky for a long time. It couldn't be dismissed. A vibration came and Chu Liwei took out his whistle. It responded automatically. And it resonated strongly with the whistle on Chang Wanzhou's body. At this moment, Chu Liwei suddenly realized that Chang Wanzhou was on the verge of death. Jian Fengqi, who was not far away, was probably not any better. He had to go down and save them immediately. Chu Liwei made a prompt decision. He held the whistle tightly in his hand and looked up at them. You guys stay here. I'll go down and bring them back. No. The few of them spoke out in unison and objected. Your Majesty, this place is dangerous. How can you put yourself in danger? Wu Ming frowned. That's right. Even if someone has to go, it has to be me. Yuan Jinghong patted his chest. Don't worry, I've almost recovered. It's best if I go. Which one of you can compare to the faint Yuan body? Mu Hongyu directly used her killer move. No one knows better than me what to do after going down, right? Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming fell silent. In terms of this point alone, they really couldn't compare to Mu Hongyu. But, your current strength is not even that of a rank 7 warrior. Mu Hongyu's face darkened for a moment. The two of you are in a high realm, but do you believe that I can take care of the two of you right now? The two of them choked. Chu Liwei patted Mu Hongyu's shoulder lightly. Let's go down together. Whether it was her or Mu Hongyu, the chances of winning were not high if they went down alone. It was best to work together and complement each other. Mu Hongyu thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Okay. Seeing that the two people with the highest combat strength had already made their decision, the remaining two had no choice but to acquiesce. Dumpling, stay here and protect the two of them. Chu Liwei seriously. Your Majesty, how can we do that? This time the two of them were unwilling. This canyon was extremely dangerous and it was already very dangerous for them to go down. If he could bring along the red-tailed red phoenix, he would at least have some confidence. How could he stay behind to protect them? Chu Liwei glanced at them. This consort has just saved all of you. This consort doesn't want this time and energy to go to waste. But, if there's no divine beast, Yuan Hongyu? Yuan Jinghong's face flushed red and she was really ashamed. An idea popped up in Chu Liue's mind, and a golden light rapidly enveloped her entire body. In the blink of an eye, it formed a golden armor. Pure gold armor? Wu Ming muttered absent-mindedly. Wasn't it rumored that this pure gold armor was damaged when Shangguan Wan went to Dahuang Swamp? How did it appear on Her Highness' body in perfect condition? Chu Liue's lips curled up. Who said that I'm going alone? The few of them were all stunned. The next moment they saw Chu Liue snap her fingers. The legendary three-eyed eagle. Whoosh! With the sound of a hurricane, a huge black figure appeared in front of them. It was a huge black eagle. When it spread its wings, it almost covered the sky. Its whole body was emitting a bone-chilling coldness, and there was a vertical eye on its forehead. Its eyes were cold, fierce, and disdainful. The suppressive aura around it was almost suffocating. God. Yuan Jinghong's face was full of shock. She pointed at the huge creature that suddenly appeared, her fingers trembling. Divine beast. Wu Ming's heart was also filled with shock because he recognized this divine beast. The legendary three-eyed eagle? This was an existence that was not inferior to the red-tailed phoenix. Her Highness summoned such a divine beast. How did she do it? Chu Liwei leaped and landed on the back of the legendary three-eyed eagle. Hongyu, come here. Mu Hongyu was also stunned. When she heard this, she came back to her senses and hurriedly rushed over. But even when she stood on the back of the legendary three-eyed eagle, she was still confused. The legendary three-eyed eagle, divine beast? Liu. With it, you should be relieved. Its speed is not inferior to dumplings. It's even faster. The legendary three-eyed eagles were originally fierce and aggressive, and their attack power was extremely strong. If they really fought, it was hard to tell who would win. No, this divine beast. What's going on? Yuan Jinghong stuttered. This was actually what Mu Hongyu and Wu Ming wanted to ask. Chu Liwei laughed. Oh, I forgot to introduce. This is my contracted beast, the legendary three-eyed eagle. Contracted beast? Yuan Jinghong's voice suddenly rose. She turned to look at Dumpling in shock. Then what is it? Chu Liyue said casually. It's also mine. It's also mine. It's also mine? Looking at the few of them doubting their lives, Chu Liyue tilted her head. I don't think I've said that I only contracted one divine beast, right? As soon as she finished speaking, there was a dead silence. Wu Ming's eyes were dull. Mu Hongyu's body stiffened. Yuan Jinghong's mouth twitched violently. Only contracted one divine beast, listen to that. Is this something a human would say? Digression, con sob. 6 o'clock mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 972. Wu Ming came back to his senses, his face full of envy and admiration. Your Majesty is indeed a genius. For ordinary people, they might not even be able to see a divine beast in their lifetime, let alone form a contract with one. In the entire history of the Tianling dynasty, there were no more than 3 people who had formed a contract with a divine beast. And Chu Liyue was not enough, there was a second one. No one would dare to believe it. Yuan Jinghong rubbed his face hard. After confirming that what he saw was real, he felt very conflicted. In the past, she had the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, and was a rare genius in the entire Tianling dynasty. Because of her existence, countless geniuses were overshadowed. Yuan Jinghong was one of them. After being defeated so many times, he accepted his fate. Some people were born stronger than you, and they were so strong that you couldn't even feel jealous of them. Who could cross the chasm that was as wide as heaven and earth? It was better to give up. Later she was assassinated and raped to death. She changed her body and identity and started all over again. This time it was not the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, right? This time, it was not the top-notch training she had received since she was young, right? This time she could surpass him even if it was just a little bit, right? When Yuan Jinghong found out that his realm was much higher than hers, he was happy for a few days. Although he knew that she would surpass him in the future, he still wanted to enjoy these happy days as much as possible. But until now, Yuan Jinghong sadly discovered that he had not surpassed her for even a day. She had formed a contract with a divine beast from the beginning. And there were 2 of them. What about him? If Dumpling had not been left behind to protect them this time, he would not even be able to touch a divine beast's fur. He stared at Chu Liyue and finally could not help but say faintly, Your Majesty, you'd better leave quickly. It was really too exciting to just casually walk around with 2 divine beasts in front of them. Chu Liyue saw his expression and knew what he was thinking. She could not help but laugh. Although Yuan Jinghong was not as competitive as Jian Fengqi, she was still a little bit competitive. It seemed like he had suffered quite a blow this time. Jinghong, I'll leave Wu Ming to you. Upon hearing this, Yuan Jinghong immediately perked up. Rest assured, Your Majesty. A smile flashed across Chu Liyue's eyes as he turned to look at the valley below. Go. The legendary three-eyed eagle flapped its wings, stirring up a gust of wind. The black silhouette instantly transformed into a black arrow, shooting straight ahead. A little to the left, yes, a little to the left, a little to the front. The legendary three-eyed eagle led the 2 of them all the way down. Mu Hongyu continued to give guidance, choosing the easiest path for them to enter. Chu Liyue could clearly feel that the lower he went, the greater the resistance he encountered. However, with the help of Mu Hongyu, they did avoid most of the spatial turbulence. Although nothing could be seen with the naked eye, the pressure between the various spaces was getting stronger and stronger. There were several times in the middle that Chu Liyue felt as if there was an invisible vortex around them that wanted to drag them away. Fortunately, they avoided it one by one. They were getting closer and closer to the 2 of them. 10 feet ahead, turn right and continue forward, yes. Mu Hongyu stared at them with rapt attention, not daring to slack off for even a moment. I really don't know why this place is so strange. It was not that she had never been to a place with chaotic space, but this was the first time she had seen such a chaotic and extremely threatening place. The slightest carelessness could lead to a great loss. Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou must be trapped here because of this and could not get out. Why would such a strange place appear in this ancient Phoenix Mountain? I don't know how it was caused. Mu Hongyu was puzzled. Chu Liyue was also thinking in his heart. 1,000 years ago, the northern underworld Taizu broke through that layer of shackles and successfully stepped into a higher realm. Logically speaking, this ancient Phoenix Mountain, as well as the surrounding mountain ranges, should be enveloped by the same power. But this was not the case. However, Chu Luiyue did not have much time to think about this problem. The most important thing now was to save the two of them first. Little Zhou. As the distance was getting closer and closer, Chu Luiyue shouted in that direction. Chang Wanzhou fell to the ground, motionless as if he had fainted. At this moment, Mu Hongyu's voice became nervous. Liu, the situation is not good. The spatial turbulence below is much more complicated and terrifying than above. You must not get close easily. Almost at the same time, several invisible waves surged over. Screech, the legendary three-eyed eagle flapped its wings, and several icicles flew out quickly. Thud thud thud. On the ground, a row of icicles instantly stood up. There were also messy cracks spreading out below. But the rebound force was not to be underestimated. Chu Luiyue could clearly feel that the surrounding space seemed to be shrinking toward the center, and his entire body was unbearably heavy. The legendary three-eyed eagle's body is too big. It's too easy to be attacked here. Mu Hongyu furrowed her brows. Chu Luiyue's mind raced, and he raised his foot to jump down directly. Mu Hongyu pulled him back and asked nervously, "What are you doing?" "Go down and save him." Chu Luiyue's words were concise and comprehensive. Mu Hongyu had explained very clearly just now. This space close to the ground was definitely not suitable for the legendary three-eyed eagle to go down. Relatively speaking, her figure was slender, and it was much more convenient. No. The spatial power below is already chaotic, and it has almost become a meat grinder. That's precisely why we have to go. Chu Luiyue broke free from her hand, jumped, and went straight in the direction of Chang Wanzhou. Luyu, just as Mu Hongyu was filled with worry, a terrifying wave suddenly came from the side. Her heart skipped a beat and she immediately turned to look. Jian Fengqi was sitting cross-legged on the ground, his eyes closed and his face pale. She did not know what he was going through. His brows were tightly knitted, and his originally handsome face was full of pain. An invisible force was slowly but firmly surging toward his chest. Upon closer inspection, one could see a trace of faintly discernible black at the edge of the force. That was the sign of a spatial crack. Mu Hongyu did not hesitate and rushed over directly. On the surface, this place looked calm and peaceful. But in reality, one could only sense the strangeness of this space when one was in it. There seemed to be all kinds of forces approaching from all directions. They wanted to tear people apart. Chu Luiyue moved in it, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, all caused by these different spatial forces. But fortunately, the pure gold sacred armor helped her to resist most of the attacks. Just like that, she approached step by step. At this moment, Chang Wanzhou seemed to have regained some consciousness, and his fingers moved slightly. Then, he slowly propped himself up and raised his head to look ahead. In his blurred vision, a figure appeared. He was stunned, and then a huge surprise and disbelief suddenly surged in his eyes. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 973. His voice was very weak. Other than himself, no one else could hear it. But that wasn't important. What was important was the person in front of him. Chang Wanzhou couldn't believe it. He quickly closed his eyes, trying to see more clearly. At this moment, the person had already walked up to him. She reached out her hand. "Little Zhou, are you okay?" He had heard this voice many years ago, but it had been too long. It didn't even sound again in his dreams. Chang Wanzhou felt a warm current between his chest and abdomen. His heart beat violently, and the vibrations made his eardrums hurt. He reached out his hand almost subconsciously with a hint of urgency. It was cold and soft to the touch, but there was some kind of great strength in it. Chang Wanzhou's eyes were sore, and the scene in front of him became even more blurry. He closed his eyes tightly again. This time, everything was finally clear. He was almost holding that hand tightly, as if he was afraid that she would leave silently again. However, just as he was about to say something, a familiar face came into view. Chu Luiyue. Oh no, it was Shang Wanyu. Chang Wanzhou's movements suddenly froze. Chu Luiyue looked at him strangely. He seemed to have just gone through a big battle. His body was covered in blood, and his face was pale and haggard. His fair and almost transparent face was smeared with dust and blood, and he looked a little embarrassed. And his overly beautiful eyes were stained with a little scarlet. She clearly saw that his eyes were filled with great joy just now. It was like a traveler walking in the desert finally seeing an oasis, or a person crawling in the darkness finally seeing light. However, it was just for a moment. The oasis dried up and the light disappeared. The bright light in his eyes instantly dimmed. His expression looked. Something was not right. Little Zhou? Chu Luiyue called out again. This time Chang Wanzhou finally came back to his senses. He quickly retracted his expression and turned back into the silent young man who was enduring silently. A vague guess surfaced in Chu Luiyue's heart. Could it be that Chang Wanzhou mistook her for someone else? The only person who could make him like this was probably that person, right? She sighed inwardly but did not pursue the matter. Don't worry, I'll take you back, she said seriously. Chang Wanzhou's heart seemed to be touched by something. He raised his eyes and looked at her deeply. Okay. Chu Luiyue checked his pulse while he was at it. He discovered that the origin power in his body was almost completely depleted, and his internal injuries were also very serious. She was shocked. How did you get this injury? Chang Wanzhou frowned. It's here. Here. Chu Luiyue looked around. Other than the dangerous spatial turbulence, there didn't seem to be anything else here. On the surface he looked like he only had a few external injuries, but the internal injuries were much more serious than those external injuries. This was truly abnormal. No matter what, let's leave this place first. With that, Chu Luiyue was about to bring him back. However, as soon as she turned around, she discovered that a transparent barrier formed by water suddenly appeared in front of her. Chu Luiyue was stunned. She remembered that there was no such thing when she first came here. All kinds of spatial energy surged in from the surroundings, and ripples appeared on the barrier. Chu Luiyue suddenly had an ominous premonition, and subconsciously took a step back. Little Zhou, it's dangerous here. As she spoke, she looked back, only to find that Chang Wanzhou's figure had disappeared. In his place was the same transparent barrier. Little Zhou? No one responded. Chu Luiyue looked around and found that the transparent barrier had formed a sphere, completely trapping her in it. Red fish. Jian Fengqi? There was still no response. The most terrifying thing was that Chu Luiyue actually heard the echo of her voice. Her heart suddenly sank. She was completely trapped here. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath, calmed herself down, and calmly observed the situation around her. This transparent barrier, which seemed to be formed by water waves, was not big. She stood in the middle, and after taking 3 to 5 steps forward, she reached the end. She raised her eyes and looked forward. If she remembered correctly, Jian Fengqi was there just now. However, his figure had completely disappeared at this time. As for the transparent barrier, it gradually turned black in this short period of time. Finally, the surroundings fell into darkness. Silence. Chu Luiyue could clearly hear the sound of her breathing and the beating of her heart. She took a deep breath and took out a pearl to light it up. However, after taking it out, there seemed to be an invisible pressure around her. It slowly compressed the fist-sized pearl. Chu Luiyue immediately threw the pearl out. The moment it left her palm, the pearl was instantly squeezed by a strong force and instantly turned into powder. Chu Luiyue could even feel the terrifying heavy pressure on her fingertips. She immediately gave up on this idea and stood quietly in the darkness. That strange force gradually approached and then retreated bit by bit. If not for the dull pain on her fingertips, she would almost think that everything just now was an illusion. Chu Luiyue held her breath and began to think of a way to get out. However, soon, a spot of light appeared in front of her eyes. It was like a star in the dark night, bright and bright. Chu Luiyue looked at it. Soon after, a second star appeared beside the first star, and then a third one. At this time she realized that this light did not come from the void, but from the barrier. These light spots were of different colors, and they emitted a lustrous glow as they pieced together bit by bit. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly, and looked at everything that was happening in front of her seriously. Gradually she realized that these light spots seemed to be slowly forming a picture. She vaguely saw that it seemed to be a cliff. This cliff was extremely familiar. Chu Luiyue suddenly thought of something and her expression changed slightly. Then an octagonal pavilion appeared on the cliff. It was indeed the mysterious cliff that had appeared too many times before. Chu Luiyue unconsciously clenched her hands, and her whole body tensed up. She faintly had a premonition that this scene should be her memory too. Above the octagonal pavilion, light gathered and a figure appeared. It was the back of a man. However, at this time he was sitting there and there was a chessboard in front of him as if he was playing chess. Opposite him, a second figure quickly appeared. It was obviously a woman with an exquisite figure, and her black hair was like clouds. However, her face was covered by the man's figure, and it was difficult to see. However, when Chu Luiyue looked at the woman's figure, her heart inexplicably started to beat faster. An extremely familiar feeling welled up in her heart. At this time, the woman tilted her head and smiled brightly. When I go back this time, I'll tell father about us being together, okay? That beautiful and smiling face was Shangguan Yu. Digression, you have to ask if I've added more. Today obviously, nope. A February with a pot lid on its head quickly fled the scene. Mobile users, please browse and read, a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 974. The man sitting opposite Shangguan Yu chuckled softly and dotingly. All right. Chu Liyue's eyes suddenly widened. That voice couldn't be more familiar. She clenched her fists tightly and stared at the scene in front of her. The woman in the octagonal pavilion rested her chin on her hand and smiled as she picked up a chess piece from the jar and placed it on the chessboard. Then she looked up and blinked her long eyelashes. Her dark jade-like eyes were sparkling and bright. Rongxiu, you've lost. Rongxiu. It's really him. The absurd and bold guess in her heart had been confirmed at this moment. Chu Liyue felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Her mind went blank and even her heart skipped a beat. All the blood in her body seemed to have frozen at this moment. That sentence kept echoing in her ears. Rongxiu, you've lost. That was what she had said to Rongxiu before. They had known each other for a long time. No wonder she felt that this man was so familiar. Chu Liyue held her breath and stared at the scene in front of her without blinking, afraid that she would miss anything. However, at this moment, the light quickly dimmed, and the entire scene disappeared. Chu Liyue immediately panicked. She subconsciously stretched out her hand, wanting to retain the scene. However, there was nothing in her hand. Other than the slowly flowing spatial energy, there was nothing else. It was as if everything that had just happened was just an illusion. But it wasn't. Chu Liyue knew very well that it was definitely not an illusion. That was a memory that belonged to her. The surroundings once again fell into darkness and silence. Chu Liyue stood on the spot in a daze, but her mind was in a mess. The scene just now kept replaying in front of her eyes. Countless questions poured out crazily. She had once been to that cliff and played chess with Rongxiu in the octagonal pavilion. Most importantly, at that time she was already with Rongxiu. If all of this was true, then it could be explained that she had lost her memory. But what about Rongxiu? Did he remember all this? Chu Liyue suddenly remembered the day she was reborn. She woke up in the deserted forest and dealt with the people who wanted to kill the original owner. Then she walked to a lake. Then she met Rongxiu. At that time, she didn't know the other party's identity. She only felt that this person was extremely strong and not to be trifled with. However, he was very courteous to her. At that time, she was full of vigilance and did not pay attention to these details. However, now that he thought about it, he seemed to have been overly polite and even, there was some kind of intimacy. Later on, he came out to help her several times and secretly helped her. Rongxiu had never been such a busybody. But she had always been an exception. Chu Liyue had asked more than once why it was her. There were so many women in the world who flocked to him. Why did he keep chasing after her? She thought that he had chosen her from the moment they met in the forest. But it turned out that everything between them was even earlier than she knew. Chu Liyue's body trembled slightly. If that's the case, Rongxiu already knew who she was? What's more, he had been waiting for her there. Suddenly there was a sharp pain in her mind. Chu Liyue cried out in pain and hugged her head in pain. She squatted down. It was as if there were sharp needles constantly stabbing into her head. It was extremely painful. Chu Liyue forced herself to stop thinking and gasped for breath. After a while, the terrible pain gradually disappeared. Chu Liyue was almost drenched in cold sweat. She closed her eyes and sat on the ground. Her body was a little cold, but she did not care too much. Because at this moment, her mind was filled with what had just happened. She no longer tried to force herself to remember anything. That would only give her a headache. But what had just happened was enough for her to ponder for a long time. She held her head and looked at the endless darkness in front of her in a daze. So, they had already known each other and fallen in love. She had even promised Rongxiu that she would tell her father about them when she returned. That means, he wants to form a marriage contract. Although she did not remember what had happened, she knew that she must have made the decision to spend the rest of her life with Rongxiu if she could say such words. So, why didn't she remember this part of her memory? She didn't even know that she had forgotten so many important things. Chu Liyue could not help but laugh at herself, but the tip of her nose was a little sour. Rongxiu, he should remember everything, right? Otherwise, why would he take care of a strange girl so much? Otherwise, why would he insist on being with her? Otherwise, Why would he be willing to kneel down just to ask for a marriage contract with her? Countless scenes alternated and it was extremely chaotic. But among them there was one point that was incomparably clear. From the beginning until now, Rongxiu had always treated her well. Whatever he had done, it was all for her. Or rather, it was to be with her. Chu Liyue's fingertips moved and touched the universe ring on her hand. She suddenly remembered that rainy night, Rongxiu's figure standing in front of the Chu family's Bluestone Street. So lonely and cold. He walked over, took her into his arms and held an umbrella for her. He said, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Chu Liyue closed her eyes, and hot tears fell silently from the corners of her eyes. Rongxiu, how long have I made you wait? The surroundings became colder and colder. Chu Liyue unconsciously curled up, but it was still difficult to resist the cold aura, which was pouring into her body from all directions. She hugged her knees and buried her head in her arms. The breath she exhaled seemed to have become much colder. Girl, girl. A faintly discernible shout seemed to come from a faraway place and fell into his ears. Chu Liyue moved and slowly opened her eyes. Her surroundings were still pitch black, but the voice was much clearer. Girl, you're finally awake. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. Taizu? Phew. Fortunately you woke up in time. If you were a little later, I'm afraid you would have fallen into a coma. Taizu was incomparably nervous, and there was a trace of lingering fear in his voice. Girl, what happened to you just now? I called for you for a long time, but you didn't respond. Chu Liyue forcefully closed her eyes and wanted to get up, but she found that her body was extremely stiff, and she couldn't move at all. The most important thing was that the force in her body had unknowingly consumed a lot. At this moment, just as she was about to move, she felt an inexplicable weakness in her body. What's going on? Chu Liyue came back to her senses and her brows were tightly knitted. Her entire body was tense and alert. This space is very strange. Just now, it seemed to have inexplicably made you fall asleep. At the same time, the force in your body is crazily spreading in all directions. I can't stop it. If it was a little later, I'm afraid. Chu Liyue pursed her lips. She had to get out of here as soon as possible. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 975. She glanced at the location where the images had appeared. It was pitch black as if nothing had happened. Other than her, no one knew what kind of shocking secret had appeared here. Chu Liyue took a deep breath and cleared her mind of all distracting thoughts. There's no point in staying here. If I want to know everything, the best way is to ask Rongxiu personally. Swoosh. Chu Liyue summoned the Dragon Abyss sword and gripped the hilt tightly. At the same time, she activated the force in her body. However, when she did this, she realized that the force in her body was dissipating worse than she had expected. The Yuan meridians in her body were like rivers. Under normal circumstances, these rivers would be abundant. However, at this moment, most of them had dried up. Chu Liyue was a little frightened. If not for Taizu, she would have been in real danger. Something is indeed wrong here. As Chu Liyue spoke, she suddenly froze. She seemed to understand why Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou had been sitting in their original spots and doing nothing, but had sent out distress signals. She had not had time to go to Jian Fengqi, but Chang Wanzhou's side did not have many external injuries. However, their internal injuries were extremely serious, and the force in their bodies had been greatly depleted. Perhaps, they had encountered the same situation as her. This strange space had used some kind of method to replay the memories of the people trapped here. It had also quietly lured them into a coma and used this opportunity to devour their force. Taizu, do you know how long we have been here? Chu Liyue asked. I'm not too sure. The spatial energy here is different from the outside world, and the flow rate is also different. Therefore, it's hard to determine how long has passed outside. Taizu sighed awkwardly. Chu Liyue nodded. Actually, this was within her expectations. Now she could only hope that Mu Hongyu and the others were still doing well. And she had to leave this place first. The water droplet in her dantian slowly rotated, and streams of force surged out, quickly flowing towards Chu Liyue's limbs and bones. Very soon, the missing energy in her body was completely replenished and she was full again. If it was anyone else, they would basically be in the same situation as Chang Wanzhou. However, Chu Liyue was different. The water droplet in her body had devoured too much force. With her current level, it was basically an inexhaustible supply. Two streams of flames surged out of the Dragon Abyss sword. One red and one transparent. This light quickly lit up the surroundings. The invisible force seemed to have sensed the threat and began to rapidly close in. Chu Liyue's body could clearly feel the pressure coming from all directions. His chest felt heavy and he almost couldn't breathe. Even the flow of origin power in his body had slowed down. She clenched her teeth and poured her vigorous force into the Dragon Abyss sword. Then he gripped the hilt of the sword with both hands and raised it high. It hacked down fiercely. Chang Wanzhou had intended to return with Chu Liyue. However, as soon as she turned around, her figure disappeared. The surroundings were empty. There was nothing. Chang Wanzhou frowned. He knew that he had fallen into the same predicament as before. The day before, when he and Jian Fengqi came here, they had also encountered the same situation. Then the two of them separated and lost contact with each other. After that, he fell into a coma. He knew that his situation was very dangerous. Relying on his last bit of rationality, he crushed the Jin Lingzi and blew the whistle. Fortunately, she had really come. However, not long after, the same thing happened again. Soon, Chang Wanzhou was shrouded in darkness again. Young Lord? Young Lord? Jian Fengqi? Wake up. An anxious and worried voice entered his ears. Jian Fengqi gradually regained consciousness. Then, he opened his eyes with great difficulty. Don't shout. Cough cough cough. I can hear you. Jian Fengqi opened his mouth. Only then did he realize that his voice was very weak and a little hoarse. Thinking of the previous incident, his eyes darkened. Then he turned his gaze and saw Mu Hongyu in front of him. Young Lord, you're finally awake. Mu Hongyu's nervous and worried expression disappeared. She heaved a sigh of relief and patted her chest. Seeing her like this, Jian Fengqi felt as if his heart was gently poked by something. His gloomy mood instantly dissipated. Instead, there was an indescribable feeling surging in his chest. What are you nervous about? I'm very lucky. He coughed again. However, he had recovered some of his strength. Mu Hongyu nodded seriously. That's good, that's good. If you didn't wake up, I was going to try and see if I could wake you up. She had already moved her wrist. The corner of Jian Fengqi's eyes twitched. No need. There's really no need. It wasn't that he didn't know Mu Hongyu's strength. If he slapped her, Jian Fengqi was suddenly very glad that he woke up in time. Otherwise this face, suddenly he paused. His eyebrows furrowed as he looked at Mu Hongyu. Wait, why are you here? He remembered that he and Chang Wanzhou had separated not long after entering this canyon. After that, he realized that something was very wrong here. He directly crushed Jin Lingzi. He wanted to get out as soon as possible. However, he didn't know why, but he fainted until Mu Hongyu arrived. We're here to save you, of course. You? Jian Fengqi looked around. They were still in the canyon. However, other than the two of them, there was no one else. Well, Lu Yu? Mu Hongyu said and sighed. It's a pity that we're trapped here now. We don't know what's going on outside and we don't know if they're safe now. Jian Fengqi almost suspected that he had heard wrong. He couldn't help but ask. Who did you say? Mu Hongyu saw his puzzled face and simply explained the cause and effect of the matter. After listening, Jian Fengqi's expression was dull for a long time. Chu Liyue forcefully split open the barrier of ancient Phoenix Mountain and came in. After saving Mu Hongyu and the others, he came here, and even summoned a second mythological beast to fly down and save them. How long had it been? How could so many things happen? Mu Hongyu didn't really care about his reaction and she only said, Young master, we have to get out of here quickly. Otherwise, with your current situation, it will only be worse if you continue to stay here. Jian Fengqi nodded. Of course he was very clear about this. However, how do we get out? The spatial turbulence here was very chaotic and terrifying. Every time he thought he was going to get out, he would be beaten back. Mu Hongyu patted her chest, her almond-shaped eyes curved. Have you forgotten that I have a faint yuan body? Leave it to me. With that, she stood up and stretched out her hand to Jian Fengqi to help him up. Then she said, Hold me tight. Jian Fengqi's heart suddenly jumped. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 976. Mu Hongyu waited for a while and realized that Jian Fengqi did not move. She looked up at him strangely. What's wrong? The girl in front of him had bright almond-shaped eyes and a pretty face. She was standing in front of him, so close that he could see her long eyelashes. Jian Fengqi exchanged glances with her, and his heart beat faster for some reason. He almost looked away awkwardly. Hugging doesn't seem to be appropriate. If these words were heard by outsiders, they would probably laugh their heads off on the spot. Jian Fengqi, who had always been a playboy, actually said something like, inappropriate to a girl. It was simply touching. However, although Mu Hongyu had heard some rumors about Jian Fengqi, she was not a native of West Hill. Moreover, she had spent most of her short months in West Hill on Dragon Teeth Mountain. What kind of place was Dragon Teeth Mountain? It was Jian Fengqi's home. Who dared to say anything bad about the young master? Therefore she did not know much about Jian Fengqi. Mu Hongyu blinked. What's inappropriate about it? You even saved me before. Shouldn't I find a way to get you out of here? We are all friends, so of course we should help each other. Thinking about how Lu Yu was willing to risk his life for them, this was nothing. Thinking of this, she took a step forward. The distance between the two of them instantly shortened. The heat and fragrance from her body assailed his nostrils and filled his body in an instant. Jian Fengqi opened his mouth but did not know what to say. His whole body stiffened. Mu Hongyu did not notice his abnormality. She grabbed his hand and placed it on her waist. The girl's slender and soft waist seemed to be on fire. The moment he touched her, his palm felt hot. A wave of heat surged up, and Jian Fengqi's jade-like face instantly turned crimson. Even his ears felt like they were on fire. With a red face, he almost instinctively hugged her waist tightly. But he did not dare to get too close. He was afraid that he would burn himself. Hold on tight. Mu Hongyu shouted softly and closed her eyes. The next moment, the power of the space around her suddenly started to surge outwards. Jian Fengqi could clearly feel that the forces that had been suppressing them earlier were rapidly moving away. Then with a flash of black light they disappeared on the spot. Boom. The long yuan sword slashed down fiercely and landed on the black barrier. There was a loud boom. The two forces madly collided, producing terrifying and crazy energy waves. The surrounding invisible forces started to churn wildly. Like sharp knives they were cutting everywhere. One of them went straight for Chu Liyue's neck. At this point, a bright light appeared from Chu Liyue's body. The pure gold armor appeared once again. Ding. Ding 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 ding. Crisp sounds from all parts of his body. Fortunately, these attacks were nothing compared to the defense of the pure gold armor. The only pity was that when the long yuan sword landed, although the black barrier was impacted, it did not seem to have any intention of breaking. At this moment, Taizu's voice could be heard. This barrier is protected by divine power. Based on your current strength, it will be difficult to break it open. Let me give you a hand. With that, Chu Liyue felt the aura of the long yuan sword suddenly surging. A vast and mighty pressure descended. Several silver lightning bolts swam wildly on the long yuan sword and finally gathered at the tip of the sword. Break! The great ancestor bellowed. That ball of silver Tianlei power suddenly exploded. Bang! The terrifying force spread in all directions. Chu Liyue's sword-wielding arm trembled violently. The web between her thumb and index finger was torn. Blood flowed out. Just as her arm was completely numb, the darkness in front of her finally broke. Crack! A bright ray of light shone into the room. A powerful force came from behind and pushed Chu Liyue forward. Chu Liyue only felt that the light in front of her was dazzling. Then her body suddenly fell. Thousands of miles away. Rong Xiu had been busy dealing with the matters of several tribes recently. He had not slept for a few days and nights. Today he finally had some time to lie down and rest. But not long after, he frowned in his sleep. Then he suddenly opened his eyes. He sat up, one hand on the edge of the bed, and the other hand gently rubbed between his eyebrows. His white inner shirt was loose, revealing his collarbone and a small part of his chest. The moonlight shone through the window and shone on his body. Every inch of skin that was unintentionally exposed was like white jade. The moonlight was like water, making his face look even more noble. He was like a flower on a snowy mountain, unreachable, cold, and calm. After a moment of silence, he lifted the blanket, grabbed the clothes beside him, and draped them over his body. Yan Qing, who was guarding outside the door, seemed to have heard the commotion in the hall. "Your Highness? You're awake? Come in." Hearing this, Yan Qing quickly pushed the door open and walked in. As soon as he entered the room, Yan Qing saw that his master not only got up, but also changed his clothes. Moreover, his face seemed to be a little strange. Yan Qing was shocked. He quickly stepped forward and asked carefully, "Your Highness, what's wrong with you?" Rong Xiu's gaze was calm, but it was frighteningly deep. "Go and get the Pantheon record." A trace of surprise flashed in Yan Qing's eyes, but he still immediately said, "Yes. I'll go and get it now. But, There are a total of 10 volumes of the Pantheon record. Which volume do you want to read? Rong Xiu thought for a moment and said lightly, the 10th volume. Yan Qing was stunned for a moment and asked, You mean, the volume of the 3,000 years of the Xian Yuan calendar? Didn't your highness read that volume before? Rong Xiu nodded gently and immediately said, And the 9th volume. If he guessed correctly, the name of the person in the North Sea seemed to be recorded in the 9th volume. Digression, 6 o'clock, mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 977. Yan Qing didn't know why His Highness suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and wanted to read the Pantheon record. After all, the number of times His Highness had opened it for so many years could be counted on one hand. And every time, it was a time when something important was about to happen. Could it be that something had happened? The 10th volume. The only thing Yan Qing could think of was that it had something to do with that person. As for the 9th volume, he couldn't think of a reason at all. But of course he didn't dare to ask these questions. After responding, he bowed and left. After Yan Qing left, the hall fell into silence again. Rong Xiu gently closed his eyes. The moonlight that was as cool as water enveloped his entire body. Under his long eyelashes, a faint shadow was cast. At this time she should be at the ancient Phoenix Mountain. He wasn't worried about how dangerous it would be. After all, with her strength and trump cards she should be able to deal with it. But, after all, it was a special place. He didn't know if that person in the northern underworld had left something behind when he broke through at the ancient Phoenix Mountain. What if, after a moment, Rong Xiu opened his eyes? The Black Pyramid was as calm as usual, as if there were no waves. This made him feel a little relieved. But for some reason he felt inexplicably uneasy. It was as if something had gone out of control. If it was something else, it would be fine, but he always felt that it seemed to be related to her. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door and Rong Xiu raised his eyes slightly. The door opened and Yan Qing returned. But this time he was holding a bronze plate in his hand. On the plate, there were 2 rolls of bamboo slips, emitting a faint glow around them. And these were the 9th and 10th volumes of the Pantheon record. Your Highness. Yan Qing respectfully handed over the 2 rolls. Rong Xiu raised his white fingers, and the 2 rolls of bamboo slips silently flew in front of him, floating quietly in the air. He took one of the bamboo slips. Every bamboo slip on it was engraved with neat golden handwriting. However, the last one was completely blank. No, to be precise, there was actually handwriting on it. But for some reason, the handwriting was so worn that it was almost impossible to read. It was as if someone had forcefully erased it. Now, only fragmented traces of stars were left, flickering with a faint golden light. It was like a few stars that occasionally appeared in the dark night. Rong Xiu stared at the few golden light spots. His eyes deepened and sighed softly. Sure, she had actually reached this step. It was much faster than he had expected. But then again, she was no ordinary person to begin with. Even if she were to start all over again, she would still be far superior to ordinary people in all aspects. But, Rong Xiu leaned against the chair and rubbed his temples with a slight headache. Yan Qing asked worriedly, Your Highness, are you okay? Rong Xiu shook his head, took one last look and closed the 10th scroll. Of Tuzis, to be. It was just that there was a small problem. Rong Xiu said. His thin scarlet lips were slightly raised. His tone was helpless, with a trace of imperceptible doting. The next time we meet, I'm afraid it won't be so easy. Prepare 2 more quilts for I. Yan Qing was confused. Cool. You're using the new one? His Highness is noble. His food, clothing and other necessities are all the best. Why does he suddenly want a quilt? It's not for now. Rong Xiu waved his hand and coughed. It's better to be prepared. Yan Qing was a little confused. His Highness meant to keep it for future use? But no matter where he went, His Highness would definitely choose a comfortable place to sleep. If he was not satisfied, he would not sleep at all. He had never needed to prepare a quilt for himself. Yes, I will do it as soon as possible. Yan Qing was confused, but his intuition, which had been trained by his master's side for many years, told him not to ask. It would not end well if he asked. Then Rong Xiu opened the remaining scroll. After reading for a while, he saw a few familiar words. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and a cluster of golden flames suddenly burned on his fingertips. Yan Qing was shocked. Your Highness. What was His Highness planning to do? It should be known that the Pantheon record could not be destroyed. Rong Xiu moved his fingertips, and a small golden spark fell on one of the bamboo slips. Like a drop of water falling into the sea, it did not cause the slightest ripple. However, such a simple action consumed a lot of Rong Xiu's energy. When his finger fell, fine beads of sweat had already appeared on his forehead, and his lips were faintly pale. Yanqing knelt on one knee. Although he did not see it clearly, he could roughly guess what he was doing. He could not help but be very worried. But His Highness insisted, and he knew that it was useless to persuade him. He could only frown and sigh secretly. After doing all this, Rong Xiu closed the scroll and put it back on the bronze plate. Send it back. Yes. After Yanqing left, only Rong Xiu was left in the hall. He sat quietly for a while before standing up. But at this time he was not sleepy at all. After taking 2 steps, a huge white figure suddenly appeared. Wishwashwa. It seemed to have felt something, and a trace of awe flashed in its eyes. Then it walked to Rong Xiu, prostrated on the ground, and wagged its tail, very obediently, acting coquettishly. Rong Xiu touched its head. It's been some time since you came back from the Red Moon Desert, right? Shueishue's body suddenly stiffened. A rare trace of gentleness appeared on Rong Xiu's face. The seniors must miss you very much. How about we go again? Ancient Phoenix Mountain. Outside the barrier. Time passed day by day, and in the blink of an eye, everyone had been in there for 14 days. There was only 1 day left until the last day of 3 elements as one. Everyone was on high alert. The closer they got to the node, the more nervous they became. The many powerhouses who were responsible for guarding the entrance and exit outside the barrier could clearly feel the surge of energy in Ancient Phoenix Mountain, which caused an obvious change in the power of the barrier. Because of this, they became more and more focused, afraid that the slightest mistake would occur. The emperors of the 4 empires were all waiting at this time. However, the expressions of these people were greatly different. Jun Qiji's expression was calm, but there was a faint trace of anticipation in his eyes. Ning Yuan was as still as a mountain. Gong Sun Xiao was a little nervous and anxious, and would look at the barrier from time to time. As for Tan Taichen, he sat in his seat and his face was extremely gloomy. His eyes were bloodshot, and his whole body was surrounded by a gloomy atmosphere. He had been staring at the colorful barrier, and there was deep hatred between his brows. Since a few days ago he had suddenly become like this. In fact, everyone could roughly guess that something had happened to the people of Taiyu dynasty inside for him to be like this. However, the time was not up and the barrier was not open, so everyone could only wait. At this moment, the sky suddenly darkened. Dark clouds gathered and the wind howled. Gong Sun Xiao could not help but point to the main peak of Ancient Phoenix Mountain. 3 elements as one is about to descend. Digression. Question. What did Rong Xiu want for the 2 quilts? The correct answer in the comments section will be rewarded with Xiaoxiang coins. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 978. Even though the colorful barrier covered the entire mountain range, everyone could still see the outlines of the mountains from the outside. For example, at this moment when everyone looked up, they could see that the dark clouds in the sky were all converging towards the highest peak. Something big must have happened if there was a natural phenomenon. If it wasn't 3 essences as one, what could it be? Tan Taichen also raised his eyes and looked over suddenly. He slowly clenched his fists, the veins on his forehead bulging, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Finally, it was at this moment. When this matter was over and those people came out of the barrier, he would definitely look for Shangguanyu and take back everything. At the same time, everyone in the barrier also noticed the commotion. In fact, most of them had already reached the bottom of the main peak. If they wanted to receive the endless force of 3 essences as one, they had to climb to the top of the main peak and stand at the highest point. Therefore, almost everyone had been heading this way for the past few days. Seeing the natural phenomenon, everyone couldn't suppress the excitement in their hearts and started to climb up. The commotion naturally attracted the attention of Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming, who were waiting at the top of the canyon. It's almost the last day and 3 essences as one is about to appear. Yuan Jinghong looked at the commotion at the top of the main peak in the distance and muttered in a low voice. He then looked down at the canyon below. But they haven't come out yet, what should we do? Wu Ming also had a worried look on his face. Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu had gone down together, saying that they wanted to bring Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou back. However, after the 2 of them went down, they sat cross-legged and didn't move at all. It had been a few days, but they still didn't show any signs of coming up. This was something that could not help but make people worried. If it weren't for the fact that the legendary three-eyed eagle was still below, they would have already rushed over. I don't know what's wrong with this canyon. Why did they stop moving after going down? Yuan Jinghong frowned. He really couldn't figure it out. After a moment of silence, he took a deep breath and stood up suddenly. I can't wait any longer. It was fine if they couldn't make it in time for 3 essences as one, but what if they didn't come up when they were close to leaving? One had to know that the time left for them to get out was extremely short. If he was careless and delayed, wouldn't he be trapped here forever? When Wu Ming heard this, his expression turned solemn. He felt that what he said made a lot of sense. Although the two of them knew that Chu Luiyue had broken through the barrier to enter, they had always thought that she had done it with the help of many experts outside. How could he not panic at this moment? I didn't go down before because I was worried that I would become a burden to Her Majesty and the others. But now, I can't care about that anymore. Yuan Jinghong said and patted Wu Ming on the shoulder. Your injuries haven't healed yet, so wait here first. I'll take the lead and go down to take a look. As he spoke, he didn't wait for Wu Ming to refuse. He quickly ran forward and leaped. Wait, Wu Ming was shocked. He was about to stop him, but he failed to do so. However, at this moment, a red flame flew out from the side and quickly blocked Yuan Jinghong's path. Yuan Jinghong turned to look at Dumpling in surprise. What are you? Before he could finish, Dumpling flapped her wings. Yuan Jinghong was instantly enveloped by a powerful force and flew back to his original spot. His eyes lit up and he looked at Tuanzi blankly. Wu Ming thought for a moment. It doesn't seem to want us to go down. Dumpling glanced at the two of them. Why go down? It's already messy enough. All he had to do was to stay here and wait. As if understanding Dumpling's gaze, the two of them looked at each other, suppressed the uneasiness in their hearts and continued to wait. No matter what, this red-tailed phoenix is Her Majesty's contracted magical beast. It should be able to sense something, right? I hope everything goes well for Her Majesty and the others. Wu Ming glanced at the main peak of ancient Phoenix Mountain and said in a low voice. Waiting always seemed to be particularly unbearable. Seeing that the sky was gradually darkening, Chu Luiyue and the others still did not move. Wu Ming and Yuan Jinghong were anxious again. But seeing that Dumpling was still calm, they could only continue to wait. Yuan Jinghong glanced at the main peak from time to time. It was a little far from here, but he could still see the flat and smooth top of the mountain. Until now, no one had climbed up. However, it was obvious that those people must be climbing halfway up the mountain. It was just that because the forest was dense, they could not see clearly and did not know the situation of the competition at this time. The sky was dark and even the figures in the valley seemed to be gradually blurred. Soon it was midnight. A bright moon hung high in the night sky, scattering its clear light over the entire mountain range. The mountains rose and fell, and the forest was dark, reflecting dark blue shadows. It was exceptionally quiet. There were only the occasional rustling of the wind blowing through the forest and the canyon. At this moment there was a sudden movement in the sky. Whirlwind. The pressure was impressive. Yuan Jinghong looked back and saw a tall and vigorous figure. With a leap, he directly climbed up the main peak of ancient Phoenix Mountain. Under the moonlight, he waved his long sleeves and his clothes fluttered. His movement technique was peerless. Jun Jiuqing. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes, stared for a while and said with certainty. After Yuan Jinghong was shocked, he quickly accepted this matter. He shrugged. It's not normal if it's not him. This ancient Phoenix Mountain was the territory of the Baiming dynasty, and he was Prince Baiming. The blood of the royal family flowed in his body. Wasn't it natural for him to be first? Wu Ming nodded and said, although that's the case, it's still very enviable to be able to climb up the mountain. Even if you're not first and can't obtain the endless force of 3 elements as one, you can still bathe in divine power. This is undoubtedly a rare opportunity. Yuan Jinghong sighed. I don't have any thoughts about this now. I just hope that Her Majesty and the rest are fine and can return safely. Bang! The sound of an explosion suddenly came from within the canyon. The two of them were shocked and looked down nervously. They saw 2 figures leaping up from below. Bang bang bang. A series of explosions sounded. The seemingly tranquil space because of the impact exploded continuously. The originally messy energy started to stir violently. It's Mu Hongyu and Feng Qi. Yuan Jinghong's sharp eyes recognized the two of them and was surprised and delighted. Seeing the two of them coming up and getting closer to them, Dumpling suddenly flapped its wings and flew up. It went straight for the two of them. A crimson figure flashed by at lightning speed. Mu Hongyu and Jian Fengqi had already landed on Dumpling's back. The chaotic and terrifying energy was attacking crazily, wanting to drag Dumpling down as well. It waved its claws and flew up at the same time. Then it landed on the cliff. Yuan Jinghong and Jian Fengqi immediately went forward, but before they could rejoice, their expressions changed drastically. This was because Mu Hongyu and Jian Fengqi were both covered in blood. What happened to the two of you? Mu Hongyu opened her mouth but spat out a mouthful of blood. Jian Fengqi's heart twitched violently as he instinctively hugged her tightly and quickly fed her a pill. He couldn't care about his own injuries and looked at the two of them. The space below is in chaos. Where's Shangguanyu? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 979. Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming were stunned. Her Majesty is still in the canyon. She hasn't come up. Jian Fengqi followed the duo's gaze and vaguely saw two figures sitting cross-legged. He gritted his teeth. That's an illusion. What? Hearing this, the two of them were shocked. When they looked again, they saw the two figures exploding in the chaotic energy battle. It was indeed not them. How could this be? Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming looked at each other. They had been guarding here for the past few days and saw them go down with their own eyes. Then they sat down next to Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou. In this period of time, no one moved at all. Why did they suddenly become illusions? Jian Fengqi frowned. There are several spaces down there that can easily cause hallucinations. The two of them should still be trapped down there. Everything was fine at first. Mu Hongyu wanted to take him and escape from that space. However, due to the pressure from several forces around them, they couldn't get out directly. Instead, they rushed into another space. After struggling for a few times, they finally reached a less chaotic place above. They even saw Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming waiting above the canyon. They were only a few steps away from successfully rushing up. However, at this moment, several spaces down there suddenly exploded one after another for some reason. The violent energy almost swallowed the two of them. Mu Hongyu barely managed to escape with Jian Fengqi after risking her life. However, along the way she suffered too many violent attacks from the space and was seriously injured. She had a faint yuan body and was naturally sensitive to space. She was already in such a state after escaping from that space. What about Chu Luiyue and Wu Ming? What should we do? Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming also realized the seriousness of the matter at this time. Their hearts were in their mouths. Wait, where's the legendary three-eyed eagle? Wu Ming suddenly shouted. The few of them looked over and sure enough, they discovered that there was nothing left in the canyon. That gigantic three-eyed eagle had also disappeared at this moment. At this time, the explosions below were much softer and soon disappeared completely. The canyon was a mess. Rocks were flying everywhere and smoke and dust were everywhere. However, there was no one. Look, what's that? Yuan Jinghong suddenly exclaimed. Above the empty ground, a silver energy vortex suddenly appeared. The silver vortex continued to expand, and the speed at which it spun became faster and faster. Just as their faces were filled with doubt and nervousness, a figure suddenly flew out from the vortex. It's Chang Wanzhou. Wu Ming saw that person's face. Due to the impact of the whirlpool's power, Chang Wanzhou flew straight towards a cliff after flying out. With such a strong impact, if not death, it would be fatal. At this moment, a red figure quickly flew out. It was Dumpling. It spread its wings and flew across the sky at lightning speed. The next moment, it appeared right in front of Chang Wanzhou and intercepted it. Before they could see what happened, they saw Dumpling flying back with Chang Wanzhou. Then it flapped its wings and carefully put Chang Wanzhou down. Yuan Jinghong immediately went forward. Chang Wanzhou's eyes were tightly shut and his body was covered in blood. Fortunately, he was still breathing. He seems to have fainted. Yuan Jinghong turned around and looked at Jian Fengqi. Mu Hongyu tugged at Jian Fengqi's sleeve, indicating for him to put her down and check on Chang Wanzhou. Jian Fengqi hesitated for a moment, then placed Mu Hongyu next to Dumpling. At the same time he whispered to her, "Your injuries are more serious. Your external injuries are more serious. Don't move around, okay?" Mu Hongyu nodded seriously, then smiled and waved her fist. "Don't worry. I've suffered even more serious injuries before. Aren't I fine now?" Last time, when she was on the brink of death, she inexplicably became a faint yuan body. Jian Fengqi's face, which always had a flirtatious smile, was cold at this moment, and he just stared at her quietly. When he was not smiling, he always looked particularly solemn, and there was a trace of coercion that made people not dare to disobey him. Mu Hongyu suddenly felt very embarrassed and inexplicably guilty. She slowly withdrew her fist. "Okay," she murmured. Jian Fengqi's expression eased a little. Looking at her embarrassed face, he wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth with his sleeve. Halfway through, he met Mu Hongyu's confused and strange gaze. Only then did he realize what he was doing and suddenly froze. Then, he pretended as if nothing had happened and withdrew his hand. However, Mu Hongyu kept looking at him. Her almond-shaped eyes were so clean and pure that for the first time, Jian Fengqi felt ashamed. He looked away and frowned as if he was a little disgusted. "Your face is covered in blood, so ugly." After saying that, he hurriedly turned around and walked towards Chang Wanzhou. Mu Hongyu touched her face. She was not angry at Jian Fengqi's words. Instead, she felt a little strange. Or rather, he was a little strange. She did not know if it was an illusion, but why did she feel that Jian Fengqi always felt a little guilty when he faced her? Jian Fengqi did not dare to turn around to look at Mu Hongyu. He walked over and took Chang Wanzhou's pulse. He frowned. "How's the situation?" Yuan Jinghong asked carefully. "The force in his body has been exhausted, and his internal injuries are very serious." As soon as he said that, everyone present started to worry. Then they heard Jian Fengqi continue. "However, his body is very special, as if there's a force gradually surging out." Jian Fengqi did not elaborate. He could feel that there was a shocking chill in Chang Wanzhou's body. This chill seemed to have frozen most of the power in his body. Jian Fengqi could vaguely sense that the power in his body was suppressed by a seal. At this moment, his internal injuries had also shaken this part. If he guessed correctly, this would increase the power in Chang Wanzhou's body rapidly. Jian Fengqi took out 2 pills and gave them to him. These 2 pills can temporarily stabilize his internal situation. As for the rest, we'll see. Wu Ming asked. "So, he's not in much danger for the time being?" Jian Fengqi hesitated for a moment and nodded. As long as the seal in his body was not completely removed, he should be safe. Hearing his words, the people around him relaxed a little. Chang Wanzhou is out, but where's His Majesty? Yuan Jinghong looked down and saw that the vortex was gradually dissipating. Soon, everything below calmed down. And Chu Liwei was nowhere to be seen. Screech. At this moment, Dumpling let out a clear cry, bent down and lowered its wings. Wu Ming was stunned for a moment and asked uncertainly. "Is it telling us to go up?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.